Your generation is actually at the same time extremely lucky and unlucky.
They take the risk, they take the chance.
Now, across Europe, as I mentioned, we're all facing quite a similar problem.
And this is your kind of, how's it called, overtaking a lane, you know, the lane in which you can be faster in your career because you have this knowledge.
Welcome everyone to the 17th Free Market Roadshow. It is our great honor that this event and distinguished guests are here. I would first like to thank all my students for attending. I hope that you will stay till the end, because many of the things that we did in class, you will now see in real life, in public policy, in geopolitics, all the things that we were doing in theory. Now you'll be able to witness this firsthand. So use this to your advantage and as something that Zashem gives you as a gift for your continuing education. I would like to first also address all of our distinguished guests. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing Zashem. It is my great honor to give the word to our Dean to introduce the event.
Thank you, Verena.
Thanks for Yep.
I feel divided. I don't like the segregation. Students are here, distinguished guests here. It's going to be very difficult to talk. But okay, first of all, dear students, thank you for joining us in such large number. Dear Matej, dear friends from TSOK, Mr. Harris, it's great to have you again here for the Free Market Roadshow, 5th time in a row. So this is the 5th time we were just discussing that we have been doing and organizing this event at the Zagreb School of Economics and Management. By the way, we had a very interesting discussion just before coming here in with our esteemed guests. We were talking a little bit about various economic models, China, Singapore, US, and there are various different kinds of opinions within the groups of how these countries have developed and became rich. How did they uplift their population? But there is probably one single truth to every one of these economic developmental stories, which is almost every single country in the world, doesn't matter what kind of political system they have, doesn't matter what kind of cultural, historical background they have. If you look at their trajectory of economic development, the moment where they became rich was the moment when these countries have, in one way or another, unleashed the economic forces of free market. In some cases, it was. You know, we can debate how these free market forces were, whether they were on full-on mode, whether they were controlled. But we have seen it all the way from China, Singapore, Korea, to I don't know, post-World War Europe. So, and this is something that we at the Zagreb School of Economics and Management, we have been supporting this kind of thinking behind the economic development, that it is really the individual's responsibility, that it is the individual's entrepreneurial spirit and ambition, and when you extrapolate it, the societal entrepreneurial ambition is what will bring society development and economic growth. And this is why we have been supporting this type of event for the last 5 years. This is why we are happy that this event is being organized at the Zagreb School of Economics and Management, and we believe that you as our students can benefit greatly from the perspectives that you will hear today. Our students know that, most of our speakers know that the whole idea behind Zagreb School of Economics and Management, when the idea was born sometime mid-90s, early 2000s, was to essentially create a new generation of leaders. I'm looking at you guys and girls. Leaders who will propel Croatia and the regional countries in the new stage of economic development. And those leaders will be inculcated at this institution with certain values, and those values are hard work, grit, entrepreneurialism, the ability and desire to take risk, the ability and desire not to keep yourself confined always to your, what we call it, the circle of where you feel very comfortable, but to take that step and go for an exchange in a country that is completely foreign to you, sometimes at a completely different part of the world. So this is how we want to kind of shape you in this very special period of your life. We believe that today's event will contribute to you eventually achieving your ambition, your goals. As you said, as probably most of you know, Zagreb School of Economics and Management is not just a higher education institution. It's kind of an ecosystem. Adjacent to the school is also a publishing house that you know it because you guys have been reading all the books, right? And the books that they have been reading, which are part of their curriculum, those are, very much the best textbooks in the field of economics, in the field of economic development. We're talking about Paul Samuelson Principles of Economics. We're talking about Why Nations Fail by the Nobel Prize winner James Robinson, who we hosted some years ago here at the school. So that is the reason why I'm telling you a little bit this story, is to understand that this is not just a short history of the last 5 years that we have teamed up with COK, Centar za obnovu kulturu, who Mr. Harris is the president, one of the co-founders. He's also, by the way, something interesting to the younger generation, was at the time advisor to legendary UK female Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So he always has this unique perspective. Still alive. Yes. Indeed. So, yes, as part of Zagreb School of Economics and Management, as part of our publishing house, these are the ideas that we very much try to promote in Croatia and wider. And again, thank you for being here. I hope you will find these sessions interesting. I very much look forward to speaking again to you later in the day, so stay until the end. I have some interesting food for thought for all of you, because we very much live in interesting times. Some guy, he was not the biggest proponent of free market ideas, once said, there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are months when decade happens. Who was it? I think it was Lenin or Stalin, one of not a big proponent of free market ideas, but I think exactly that line kind of applies to the time where we live today, because if you're following, whether it's geopolitics, whether it's technological advancements, I mean, it feels like drinking water out of the water hose. It's just so many things are happening, but hopefully we'll be able to make some sense of what's happening by the end of today's session. So thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers, and I look forward to today's sessions. Okay, thank you.
Super.
In još živ. Friends and fellow free marketeers, welcome, dobrodošli svima. This, as you've heard, is the 17th Free Market Roadshow, which the Center for the Renewal of Culture, Centar za obnovu kulture, COK, has hosted, and we're delighted to be back at Zagreb, Croatia's top business school. To je potrebno. Our cooperation with the Austrian Economics Center and with Barbara Kolm and her colleagues is central to COK's mission of propagating the merits of the free economy. Now, Austrian economics isn't just a view of economics, but a view of how the world works. Along with Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek is, of course, its most famous exponent. Until the eruption of MAGA populism and democratic illiberalism in the United States and in Hungary, respectively, Hayek's analysis was the generally accepted basis of a conservative view of the role of the state. Now, that view is not based, as most liberal views are based, on the theoretical concept of rights. As Edmund Burke might have said in today's language, natural rights exist, but it's difficult, if not impossible, to base government policy on them. The Hayek analysis, and though he claimed not to be a conservative in most respects, he clearly was one. In other words, the conservative liberal analysis is based essentially on an understanding of the limits of possible knowledge that politicians and bureaucrats can have. It requires of them humility, which does not come easily. It requires, above all, renunciation of that most dangerous of objectives for which down the years rivers of blood have been shed and undreamt of wealth has been dissipated, namely the search for utopia through the planned economy and society. Now, this doesn't mean, and let me emphasize this doesn't mean that, and it has never meant for conservatives at any rate, that everything in society has to be decided by markets. Markets are ultimately a means and not an end. That end, which markets vitally support, is to allow human beings to flourish and prosper. In Centar za obnovu kulture, we would add that it's only by shaping culture, kulture, that we can truly contribute to a better world for the next generation. And at the masthead of the ZOC website, you will find, if you bother to look, that we stand for, I quote, conservative values, national sovereignty, and personal freedom. It doesn't explicitly and directly mention free enterprise, but the free economy, which, like other true freedoms, has uniquely been generated by Western civilization, remember, not the Chinese, is essential to fulfilling everything that conservatives want, or at least should want. Today, this is too often forgotten or denied. Now, continuing this theme of modesty, I personally contributed almost nothing to this event. All the credit should go to him, SOC's General Secretary Matej. And let me add, whatever you don't like, you can blame him for as well. I did, though, suggest the panel themes, which seem to me central to our concerns. And I should be happy if, after this first panel, we are reminded why open trade is the condition of mutual prosperity, why the case against mercantilism, about which you all have read, against mercantilism is as strong as it ever was, and why tariffs, let alone tariffs that change without warning from one day to the next, should not be used as a political weapon. Our second panel looks at something even more fundamental, which is how economic growth occurs, why we need it, why, at least in Europe, we don't have it, and how we can increase it. The third panel looks at a future which is unfolding so fast that it's difficult to keep pace. The AI revolution, like all economic revolutions, will have both socially bad and good results. But Luddism, about which you will also have read, Luddism never succeeds. Entrusting control to national or international bureaucrats will exact a cost, and perhaps a very high cost. Well, we're privileged to have, as in the past, eloquent experts to speak to us. And I'll just say very briefly a word about them. Eamon Butler, there he is. Nice tie, good man. Director of the Adam Smith Institute in Britain, has been with us in previous years. This is the 250th anniversary of Adam Smith's great book, The Wealth of Nations, and Eamon's going to take that, I think, as his starting point. Well, a second refugee from Keir Starmer's Britain will also address us, Darwin Friend, on There he is. Not, I gather, on his first visit to Croatia, but anyway, on his first visit to Zagreb. And this, I think, is his first free market roadshow tour. Now, Darwin is research director of the Taxpayers Alliance, and so he's well qualified to explain why, second only to death, taxes, especially high and complex taxes, are a killer. On the same theme of tax reform, Dan Mitchell, where is he? There he is. a public policy economist in Washington, D.C., and a frequent participant at free market roadshow events, is one of the best known and influential advocates of the flat tax and the value of tax competition. Chris Lingle, and there he is. As those of you who haven't heard him will find out, is an amazing speaker. He is attached in different senior capacities to a range of important economic institutions across the world, and he's going to speak about the role of the entrepreneur. I think that this is the first time that Žiga Turk, who is with us, has spoken to the Zagreb COC FMRS. And one of the goals that Matej and I established a while back was to try to strengthen links between like-minded scholars and public personalities in Croatia and Slovenia. For whatever reason, these are not as good as they should be. Professor Turk is a scholar and a former minister, so his contribution is doubly relevant. The Croatian side, however, is not to be outdone. We have two remarkable homegrown experts to speak to us, whom I see one. Is the other?
They are coming there. Package is coming.
I see. Of whom I see one, as I said. Damir Novotny. Is professor of economics in the Algebra Bernays University in Zagreb. And he is, to my mind, Croatia's most interesting and consistently well-informed economic commentator. I don't mind admitting that I'm even more enthusiastic because he really understands, as I know, from seeing at first hand what the Thatcher Revolution in Britain meant. Well, I don't think that Nenad Bakic is with us. Is he coming? Well, I shall speak about him in absentia. Not good manners, but necessary. And I do recall him coming to a Centar za obnovu kulture event many years ago now. And what I'm going to tell you is proof of my own lowbrow outlook. I don't just remember the lively discussion, but the absolutely terrific wine that he brought from his vineyard. I don't think he's going to bring that today, but I think it's the only wine of 16 degrees that I have ever drunk. And you can't drink too much of it. So, well, Mr. Bakic is, as Croatia need no reminding, one of the country's most successful businessmen and a refreshingly radical contributor to public debate, including, on the subject today, the effects of AI. And now, our moderators. I, ladies and gentlemen, am not a moderator. I was judged not moderate enough. Anyway, Matej Hittner, there he is, will moderate the first panel on trade. He's a young tax and policy expert with a keen understanding of the principles and not just the nuts and bolts of economics, and he's been contributing for some years now to our discussions. My colleague Matej Ćurić will moderate the second panel. Now, Mate is a genuine entrepreneur, and that in a country where the shadow of socialism is longer than you might imagine, or than you might sometimes admit, that is something of a rarity. Because most people prefer to be managers, not entrepreneurs, managers, a term you may recall beloved of Yugoslav socialists. They were all managers. Why? Well, there is less risk. And since the state sector is enormous, you don't need to be too clever to get on, just well connected. Entrepreneurs, as I'm sure Chris Lingle will explain, live with risk. In Matej's case, combined with the still bigger risk of bringing up 6 children. So, Vedrana Privicevic, who will moderate the final panel on AI and who has helped us with FMRS in many ways over these years, is a professor here at Zashem, teaching economics. Her fields are economic growth and economic inequalities, and she's also a regular and very interesting economic commentator in the media. Well, welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming. Let's begin the first panel.
Thank you everyone for coming. We're officially beginning. So I am Matej Hittner. I will be the moderator for the first panel. I have the honor of introducing the first guest. So the format will be, each guest will first hold a 10-minute presentation where they will set their views. And after both of them done, we will have a sit down and we will have a friendly conversation. So I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Novotny, professor of economics at the Algebra Berne University in Zagreb. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Zagreb. In the early 2000s, he was member of the Council of Governors of the Croatian National Bank and participated in the pension reform in Croatia that began in 2001. Professor Novotny is also author of a large number of scientific articles and publicist works in the fields of economics, creative economy, tax system, and regional development. He is also the author of several books in the fields of creative economy and political economy. So now, without further ado, Professor Novotny will prepare his presentation and tell us something interesting. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. I am very pleased to see you. It's such a great number. Thank you. When I'm starting with lecturing the students about economics, I'm always saying that economics is the science. It's the science which is looking for empirical evidence how to manage scarce resources. The scarcity is our field. The list of our wishes is without end, and the list of resources is having the end. The end is the limited resources, and that is not easy task to accomplish balance between our wishes or wishful thinking and resources. I strongly believe that the answer we should find in free trade. Free trade is balancing our wishes and resources. This task could not accomplish a single guy like president of government, prime minister, or even couple of ministers. Only thousands of consumers and millions or thousands and millions of suppliers could find the balance. And it is so for almost 5,000 years. Did you learn about the first coin, the first money coined in the history? When did it happen and where? In Kingdom of Lydia, today's Turkey or Turkite, I'm not sure. The king was the Croesus, one of the most wealthiest men in the world's history, in the human history. And these discussions about how the rich people are getting richer because of the free trade, compared to Croesus, it makes no sense. But back to the topic, free trade, is it the fair trade? Although the fair trade is a social movement, in fact. I'm sticking to my couple of ne, tu mi se čini, ovo je tu nešto, evo ga, sad ćemo to. Ok. couple of usual questions. We can see in contemporary world two types of policies. Free trade policy, although there is no totally free trade policy, maybe in Europe, in European Union, but also it is not perfect. Versus protectionism, we see a lot of protectionism, even in Croatia. Yes, the Croatian government decided to cap the gasoline prices. Today, the oil prices dropped down by, I don't know, 20%. What is the goal of such a measure? Only to make additional unbalances in free trade markets. The free trade versus trade policy. What is the trade policy, and how we can resolve dilemma about the free trade if it is fair trade? The simple definition: free trade policy is an economic policy which is promoting exchange of goods and services without any barriers, quotas, or restrictions. That is a simple idea, and this simple idea was dominating, let's say, until the end of the 19th century or mid-20th. What are the benefits? What are the advantages? First of all, free trade increased growth. And growth is, from my perspective, the single goal in order to increase the production of the added value, which can be distributed through two channels: free trade channel or political channel. But for me, it's also very important that the free trade channel is facilitating technology transfer and technology spillover. That is very, very important. Improves efficiency and it promotes innovations. Improves product variety and lower prices for consumers. Look at the simple example, Uber of US, founded in 2007, I believe so, in San Francisco. Lowered taxi or cab prices in Croatia by 50% within 10 years period of time. At the beginning of 2000, the price per kilometer in Zagreb the fare was, I believe, 1.8 euros per kilometer. At that time, average salary was 500 euros. Today, we are paying Uber per kilometer 1.2 euros, and average salary is 1,600. That is the example of the free trade. Uber wasn't very well welcomed in Croatia. A lot of opponents, because there was a lot of myths about Uber and Uberization. We can discuss it later on about this. Free trade arrangements are lowering the prices for consumers' benefits, without any doubt about it. But there are a lot of myths, a lot of noises surrounding us about the free trade. And the myths are, as we know, are not the true. The myths are myths. The first myth is that more exports promoting by protectionism is meaning more wealth. It is not the true. It is not the true. Poor people suffer more from tariffs than high-income people or rich people. And that is not true. The second myth is that free trade means jobs go overseas. It is not true. Free trade may reduce number of jobs, but in inefficient industries. Look at the Croatian example. We used to have, I don't know, 6, 7 shipyards. Every single shipyard was heavily subsidized by Croatian and Yugoslavian government. Productivity was very poor. What we protected inefficient companies, inefficient enterprises. Without any, I've been invited to develop a last resort plan for Uljanik shipyard. They've had negative capital about $1 billion, 5,000 people, 2,500 more than balanced. What does it mean to give this shipyard every year 300 or 400 million euros in subsidies? That make no sense. The third myth is that restrictions on trade help domestic economy. It doesn't help. And that is not myth. That is not true. And the fourth myth is that trade treaties require a surrender of sovereignty. It is not true. In fact, trade treaties enhance freedom, as Milton Friedman used to say. Protectionism is an economic strategy that restricts international trade. It was the case in Croatia until 2000. Everything was restricted. What was the outcome of such an economic policy? High prices, very low productivity, low incomes, and economic growth was poor, extremely poor. Protectionism versus free trade, the answer is, for me, very clear. Showing this cartoon, what does it mean? We discussed it before the session about economic systems in socialism, self-management socialism in ex-Yugoslavia. What was the case? Protected economy, not producing new values without the consumer suffering, without any. There was no enough bananas, coffee beans, detergents, nothing. But the economy, Yugoslavian economy, was protected with high tariffs. High tariffs are not bringing the wealth in the economy and to the people. One quote from Milton Friedman, very famous quote: "Trade policy, while it may provide temporary protection to certain industry, rarely improves overall economic well-being." How we are evidencing how it is going about almost a year ago, on the 2nd of April, President Trump declared Liberation Day. What happened? Nothing. The deficit is let's say, the state budget deficit is 1.8, something like that, billion, not reduced. Although U.S. government increased revenues from tariffs, from customs duties. But deficit is the same. Trade balance, these twin deficits didn't reduce. Who is suffering? Consumers. Because most of the tariffs were transferred to the end users, to the customers. Therefore, I do not see any reason why US government is insisting. There is no economic explanation why US government is insisting on the tariff policy, trade policy, such a trade policy. Little bit about fair trade. It is, as I said earlier, social movement that is insisting on sustainability, ethical standards, living standards, wages in countries from which the goods and services are coming to the end users' countries. Couple of examples: work conditions, living conditions, sustainability. Although the sustainability is, in Europe at least, one of the common goals. Sustainable development is one of the common goals in Europe, not in all countries in Asia or US. In essence, free trade seeks to remove restrictions, while fair trade seeks to create social and economic justice. But is there any social justice? Is there any economic justice? Quoting again a great Austrian, Hayek, Hayek tried to find the justice. We could not find it. Only, from my perspective, from my belief, only the market, the free market, could find the way how to balance our needs and our resources. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker. We'll also hold a presentation. So, Mr. Dan Mitchell, public policy economist in Washington, D.C. His major research interests include tax reform, international tax competition, the economic burden of government spending, and other fiscal policy issues. He is one of the nation's leading experts on the flat tax and has been the leading international voice in the fight to preserve tax competition, financial privacy, and fiscal sovereignty. Dan was a senior fellow with the Cato Institute for 11 years and spent nearly 17 years as an economist at the Heritage Foundation. He was also the director of tax and budget policy for He was also a director of tax and budget policy for Citizens for a Sound Economy. Big applause for Mr. Mitchell.
All right, I have a presentation as well. I assume I can find it by all right, who knows where my presentation is? Well, you're supposed to. Is it on your USB?
I'm not sure.
Oh wait, that's the. Is this it? No, that's not it.
How is it called?
Well, just as he's finding my presentation, I'm going to be talking about trade in the context of what Donald Trump is doing. And I suppose I should start with an apology on behalf of the American people for Trump's protectionism, which is unfortunate. It's on your USB, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, so I think if we just load it from there. We already heard in the first presentation sort of some of just the logical reasons why free trade is a good idea. What I'm going to do is now put it in the context of what Trump is doing. And I grew up in New York, so I talk fast. So hopefully I'll get through all my slides in a good period of time. I'll start with just what is Trump? He calls himself tariff man. He doesn't believe many things. His views have changed over the decades, but one thing has been very consistent. He has always misunderstood trade. He thinks a trade deficit means you're losing. In his first term, he did some protectionism, but it's been much, much worse in his second term. We already heard about Liberation Day. Oh, I called them Rump instead of Trump. That was probably a Freudian slip. But let's go ahead and look at what Trump thinks. And it doesn't have any intellectual consistency, because if you think that a merchandise trade deficit is harmful to the economy, then you think that you have to have trade taxes as a supposed solution. On the other hand, Trump thinks that foreign investment in the U.S. economy is a good thing. He's actually right on that. But here's the inconsistency. You cannot simultaneously have a foreign investment surplus and a trade deficit. The only way foreigners can invest in your economy is if they are selling you things and earning dollars. And it's not just theory. These mirror images are the foreign investment surplus and the trade deficit. If you want more money being invested from overseas in your economy, you have to have a trade deficit. There's no mathematical way you can avoid that. Foreigners only get dollars by selling things into the U.S. economy. So Trump wants this and he wants this, but obviously they're on the different sides of the equation. You cannot have a trade surplus and a foreign investment surplus. Here's a tweet that Trump did. I am tariff man. When people or countries come in to raid the great wealth of our nation, I want them to pay for the privilege of doing so. It will always be the best way to max out our economic power. We are right now taking in billions in tariffs, make America rich again. And I put all these explanations. Almost every single word was wrong in that tweet. If I was an economics professor, not only would I flunk him, we would have to pass a law for the death penalty for bad economic policy. Now, of course, that might wipe out half of Congress too, but what can you say? Now, why does Trump have this sort of very primitive view of trade? Well, he has this vision, this romantic vision. Oh, well, I want an America filled with factories and blue-collar workers building cars and steel and stuff like that. But let's look at a couple of things he doesn't understand. This is manufacturing as a share of GDP ever since World War II in the U.S. 1947 all the way up to about 2020. And manufacturing is relatively constant as a share of GDP. So we have not had a hollowing out of America's industrial base. What has happened, however, is that manufacturing employment as a share of the working population has gone down consistently. Why? Because workers are more productive now. It takes a lot fewer workers or man hours to build an automobile than it used to be, or to get a ton of steel. Now, interestingly, on this chart, I put when NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was enacted, as well as when China entered the World Trading System. It hasn't really changed the line. You need fewer and fewer workers in a modern, rich economy to produce things. And that's good. You want there to be more productivity in your economy. Paul Krugman is not known for being a free market economist, but he said something once that every single free market economist will agree with. Productivity isn't everything, and I'm not giving the quote exactly, but in the long run, it's the most important thing. More productivity in your economy means on a per capita basis, the people in your country are richer. If you want to have a richer, freer, more prosperous society, you want there to be more productivity, you want people to produce more per hour worked. And that's what's happened in manufacturing. We don't need as many manufacturing workers. Now, Trump says, oh, but we do somehow, we do. And so he imposes the Liberation Day tariffs. And what happened to jobs? Well, obviously, let me give a caveat. Lots of things affect the economy. Lots of things affect jobs. Tax policy, government spending policy, regulatory policy, monetary policy, all sorts of things affect the economy. Even exogenous events like weather, a massive hurricane or something like that can cause your economy to have a hiccup. But nonetheless, look at job creation before his Liberation Day tariffs and look at job creation after. Now, but what about manufacturing? What about manufacturing? Tariff bans Liberation Day, and look at what's happened to factory jobs. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that Trump's Liberation Day tariffs caused factory jobs and manufacturing to go down, because on a long-run trend, as we already saw, manufacturing jobs are declining because we're getting more and more productive. But I suspect it has contributed. Why do I think it has contributed? Well, before I get to that, let me show you another chart. The trade deficit in 2024, the trade deficit in 2025. Trump's, he had two goals: more manufacturing jobs, but also let's reduce the trade deficit. His trade taxes have not succeeded. So on every possible basis, what he said was the goal of doing his trade taxes, his protectionism, he has not achieved them. Now, if you look at Donald Trump on one side of the debate, there's an economist on the other side of the debate, Frederick Bastiat, from way back in the 1800s. And Bastiat wrote, "Trade protectionism accumulates upon a single point the good which it affects." In other words, there might be a factory producing steel in America, and so if we have high trade taxes on foreign steel, that might help some workers in that one factory in America. That's what he's saying here. While the evil inflicted is infused throughout the mass. In other words, the rest of the country suffers because of the higher trade taxes on foreign steel. The one strikes the eye at a first glance, while the other becomes perceptible only to close investigation. So if you're a politician, let's put that Bastiat quote in modern language. If you're a politician, I'm putting trade taxes in, and look at the people working in this steel factory, and the people in that steel factory will applaud because they get above market wages, their jobs are safe. No one likes to lose a job, of course, so it's all very understandable. But what Trump does not understand, and what a lot of protectionists don't understand, is that for every job in the steel producing sector in America, there are a lot more jobs in the steel using sectors in America. So let's look at another quote from Bastiat. "Between a good and a bad economist, this constitutes the whole difference. The one takes account of the visible effect." In other words, we're protecting jobs in the steel factory. The other takes account both of the effects which are seen and also of those which it is necessary to foresee. In other words, it's very easy to see the jobs you're saving in a steel factory when you put in higher trade taxes, but what about the jobs elsewhere in the economy, the jobs that use steel as an input? So let's look at now, instead of some quotes, let's look at some empirical data. In this case, we're looking at aluminum. That's another area where Trump imposed these steep tariffs. There are 60,200 aluminum-producing jobs in America that use aluminum. Guess how many jobs there are in America where aluminum is used as an input? 10,676,460. This is the unseen. This is what Donald Trump does not appreciate. This is the scene. He goes to an aluminum factory. The workers applaud for him. The shareholders of the aluminum factory, they applaud for him because they're being protected from competition. And by the way, this is a very simple concept. If there's only one gas station in your town, that one gas station is going to charge you high prices. It's going to give you crummy service, and you probably won't have convenient hours. But there are 10 gas stations in your town. They're going to compete for your business. So from the consumer perspective, from the economic efficiency perspective, you want there to be a lot of competition. Donald Trump does not want competition for these 60,000 jobs here. But by focusing on those 60,000 jobs that he sees, he hurts the 10.676 million jobs that use aluminum as an input. Now, these are potential victims. These are potential beneficiaries. Let's look at now some data from the steel industry on what actually happened to jobs from some research in Trump's first term. In Trump's first term, when he did steel tariffs, supposedly there were 1,000 additional steel jobs created. But the academics who were researching this found out there were 75,000 jobs lost. This is the scene that Bastiat talked about. This is the unseen. It's very difficult to identify jobs that are lost because were they lost because of the steel tariffs? Were they lost because of changing consumer demand? Was there some creative destruction in the economy, as Schumpeter called it, that might have phased out those jobs anyhow? So when economists do their academic research and they're doing their statistical regressions and stuff like that, obviously it's always an estimate. Nothing is ever perfectly done when you're doing that kind of research. But nonetheless, we find whether or not it's 75 jobs lost for every one saved, whether it's 70, whether it's 80, we'll never know exactly. But clearly, Donald Trump's trade taxes are having a negative net effect. I shared this at a speech in Mexico last year. These are the 10 most protectionist countries in the world, based on the Economic Freedom of the World Index from the Fraser Institute. These are the top 10 free trade countries. Giant gap, $46,550 per capita GDP versus $3,212. Now, obviously, these countries have lots of problems. They probably have bad fiscal policy, bad monetary policy, so on and so forth. But clearly, the protectionist countries are not a success. Why would you want to copy the countries that are among the poorest in the world? Now, I'm going to give a caveat as I begin to wrap up. I am not a 100% free trader. Let me give you some exceptions. Do I think that America should sell F-35 fighter jets to Russia? No. So I am not a pure free trader. Do I agree that it's a problem to trade with a country that cheats, a country that has export subsidies, government allocation of capital? That's a problem. Now, Milton Friedman said, look, if another country wants to subsidize sales to American consumers, we should simply say thank you. That's partly true, but it's also no question that you're distorting the terms of trade here. And I think there's a legitimate argument that if another country's cheating, how do you deal with that? The good answer was going through the WTO. Of course, Trump helped to make the WTO largely irrelevant. And then, of course, maybe with everything that's going on with Russia, Ukraine, Iran, maybe there'll be a war. I hope not, because a lot of us might wind up dead. But if you're going to have a war, you do want a defense industrial base to make your tanks and your planes and stuff like that. I'm not an expert on those issues. I'm simply pointing out that you can be for free trade 99% of the time and still realize that maybe in theory there are some potential exceptions. But I think the obligation is on the people who want to restrict trade to identify those exceptions. A couple of more slides to stop with. One of the worst things about protectionism is it's very corrupting to the rule of law. Look at what happened to lobbying expenses. Very little money spent on trade lobbyists. Oh, Trump's first term, more money being spent, then it faded out during Biden. Look what's happened in Trump's first term. I have friends in Washington. I've been in Washington for more than 4 decades. I have friends who are lobbyists. They're good people, but they're amoral. If you go to a lobbyist, here's a bunch of money, go lobby to kill little children. They'll go lobby to kill little children because they're getting a paycheck to do that. Some of them, even though they might privately know that protectionism is a bad idea, you give them a big paycheck, they'll go lobby for protectionism. And what happens? You have all sorts of insider deals. Apple gave a lot of money to Trump, and guess what? A lot of the protectionism that would have hurt Apple is wiped off the board. So you're losing the rule of law. You have all sorts of problems. I want to go back, not to Trumpism, but I want to go back to what Ronald Reagan believed, that we should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends. That's what Trump has done. If you want to argue that there should be trade restrictions with Russia, fine, go ahead. Why should there be trade tariffs against Croatia? Why should there be trade tariffs against Canada or Mexico? It's really, really damaging. So let's wrap it up with a look at what protectionism really means for America. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I have been informed that we don't have much time. We have around 10 minutes. Mr. Mitchell has a plane to catch. So I'm going to give a few questions to both of the candidates. Let's make it snappy. Let's make it energetic. And then maybe we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. If you have a question, make it very quick. And we'll try to extract as much information as we can from our esteemed guests. Works. Excellent. All right. So Mr. Mitchell had in the closing slides the exception to free trade. So I think we all agreed that free trade, in theory, is excellent when it comes to value creation. But let's go to real politics. War with Russia, war with Iran, threats of war around the North Hemisphere, around Greenland, etc. What do you think is the near and mid future of free trade? Can there be free trade again with between EU and the US, or will there be a fear of contingent reshoring, that EU needs to be dependent fully from the US, etc., etc.? What's your opinion?
I think once Trump is done with his second term in office, I think the U.S. goes back to being a normal country. Not perfect, but at least in general in favor of free trade. Now, will the WTO and the GATT process get rejuvenated? I don't know, but presumably at least there might be plurilateral and bilateral free trade agreements. So I'm optimistic in the long run, but for the next, 2 years and 9 months, I'm very pessimistic.
An idea of progress is continuing. It is not a linear process, but I strongly believe, I'm with you, that in long term, free trade will be the winner. What I believe in short or medium term is that we can exploit the resources within the Europe. Internal free trade within the Europe or between the Europe and Mercosur, for instance, could be the solution how we can get out of this Trump trap. And therefore, long term, yes, free trade is the winner. In short and medium term, we can manage the situation.
Let me say one other thing. The European Union is not without some of its flaws. The whole sort of carbon-based protectionism that's happening is unfortunate. It's basically protectionism using the green agenda as an excuse. So Trump is way up here in terms of being wrong, but the EU is a little bit wrong too. But you don't want to be in that list of 10 countries that are the worst in the world. And I don't even think Trump's gotten us down that far.
So there's a country called China, and they're a very big trading bloc, a very big economy. So my question to the panelists are, to which extent would you support free trade with China, in the context of which industries would you still like to see shored in the US, and to what extent would you like to see trade with China? And the same question for Mr. Novotny, but in the context of the European Union. A free trade agreement with China? If so, with what exceptions?
The good news is that China, ever since Mao, has economically liberalized. They're not a completely free market economy by any stretch of the imagination, but Chinese living standards have dramatically improved over the last 40 years because of at least a shift in the direction of free markets. Is China perfect? No. Does China have export subsidies? Yes. Does China have government-controlled allocation of capital? Yes. These are some of the problems I said where you might have exceptions, the free trade orthodoxy. I would like to see the U.S. in a very friendly way, sit down with China and say, look, let's strike a free trade deal. You get rid of subsidies for your exporters and your domestic industry. We get rid of our trade taxes. We can both become richer. It's amazing. Every Chinese majority jurisdiction in the world is rich except for China. Macau's rich, Hong Kong's rich, Singapore's rich, Taiwan's rich. China's not rich. It could be rich. I want China to become a rich country. That means it needs more economic liberalization. I think there's a great deal to be had where the U.S. gets rid of trade barriers, China gets rid of export subsidies. We can both become much richer.
It will most probably not happening.
I said what I wanted, not what I think will happen.
China is a great, huge country, a country of large numbers and small numbers. Look at the GDP per capita. lower than Croatia. Look at the internal imbalances, social imbalances. Look at the number of nations. European model, from my perspective, could be the future because sooner or later nationalism will appear in China. In China, even in US. Look at the mayor of New York. And another example, etc. That's another discussion. I would say China will continue with this, will for sure will be trapped in stagflation, let's say, in the next couple of years, like Japan is almost 20 years. Because I do not see, and I'm quoting Nobel Prize winner Darren Acoglu, saying, okay, we see number of patents in China, but little work. And therefore, I'm not very optimistic regarding the continuous growth of China. I strongly believe that India is the next big thing. And therefore, I am appreciating efforts coming from European Union to achieve certain arrangements between free trade arrangements between European Union and Mercosur and the European Union in India. India is our, let's say, future market.
So I have a question especially for Mr. Mitchell. It's going to be short, and then we can take probably 2 questions, but please make it short. So the United States is probably the only developed country in the world that does not have a national value-added tax on the national level. When I hear Trump, and when we look at tariffs from like a technical aspect, it seems like he has this instinct that he wants to shift part of the tax burden to the consumers. Well, willingly or not willingly, it's what tariffs do. They sneak it inside the input price, while value-added tax also burdens the consumer, but at the end point. Would you, as a tax guy who spent many years in the tax reform, but also someone who is, in the American context, a more Friedmanite leaning, free trade leaning, support a value-added tax in the US if it means free trade? Or any other comment in that regard?
Well, first I have to correct you. I'm not a tax guy. I'm an anti-tax guy. I do worry that Trump, because he doesn't have well-formed, intellectually consistent views, might get lured into a value-added tax. But I think the greater threat is actually something called a border adjustable tax. And this is this idea that when businesses fill out their tax returns, every import can't be deducted, which is the equivalent of having a tax on every import, and then every export dollar is exempted from your income. Now, that's a big disruption. I was complaining about the carbon border taxes in the European Union. That's a problem. This would be a much bigger problem because you would have retaliation from probably every country in the world. That, I think, is the greater threat because, unfortunately, there are some Republicans on Capitol Hill that like that idea, but it's such a monkey wrench in the global economy. I don't think it'll happen, but then again, I didn't think Trump would be president, so I'm not confident in my predictions.
All right. Who has the great question? Come on. Okay, medium question. Come on. We have time for 1, maybe 2 questions. All right. Excellent.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Bayastan. I'm exchange student here. My name is Bayastan. I'm exchange student from Kazakhstan here at the SHEM. And I wanted to ask regarding today AI race. For example, now all the infrastructure of AI owns by China and US. And what do you think, for example, for Europe? Should Europe invest more on local AI market and infrastructure and limit, for example, investments from China and US to Europe or developing countries? Should developing countries limit like investments from big markets to develop its own economies. For example, in AI stage. Like, what do you think?
Good question.
Well, if I understand correctly, you're asking whether countries should adopt an import substitution approach. Didn't work for Argentina, didn't work for Mexico. I don't think it's ever worked for any country that's done it. Now, if you make the question more specific and technical, are there times when you don't want the U.S. to be a major investor? Are there times when you might not want China? Are there national security, national defense? Are there some potential wrinkles in those exceptions to free trade I talked about? Yeah, maybe. But as a general rule, if there's going to be like investment, especially public infrastructure, anything where the government is doing a contract, I mean, you want someone who can meet the technical specifications at the lowest cost. I think that's as a 99%, that should be the rule that you follow. Might there be exceptions? Sure. But again, I think the argument that there should be an exception, the obligation is on the people promoting that to make the case. The general rule should always be open, competitive, free markets with the lowest cost bidder who can meet the qualifications being the one accepted.
China is rarely investing capital into the developing countries. Look at the Bosnia and Herzegovina, look at the Montenegro, look at the Serbia. We have here examples. They are loaning the money and they are trying to finance with the loans their companies, which are building the bridges, which are building the railroads, not taking care about the working permits, the workers' rights, the rule of law, nothing. And I'm not sure if it is the right approach to get the loan from China, look at the Montenegro, to get the loan in Serbia, to overprice their work, look at the Croatia and the bridge between the mainland and Pelješac Peninsula. I'm not in favor of it.
All right. I'm going to wrap it up. Big applause for our panelists. And yeah, thank you.
So the second panel is Escaping Stagnation, Achieving Higher Growth, how to do it. So on this panel, we will have three distinguished speakers from three great institutions, Adam Smith Institute, Taxpayers Alliance, and American Institute for Economic Research. So first one who will give his speech is Dr. Eamon Butler. He's a director of the Adam Smith Institute, rated one of the world's leading policy think tanks. He has degrees in economics, philosophy, and psychology, gaining a PhD from University of St. Andrews in 1978. So Eamon is the author of the books on the pioneering economists Milton Friedman, Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, and Adam Smith, and the co-author of 40 Centuries of Wage and Price Controls. Please, Eamon, the seat is yours. Do you want to speak here? Or? Oh, there.
Can you tell me how to change it?
No.
Well, thank you very much. I was once asked what the greatest invention of all time is. So I reached into my pocket and everyone said, oh yes, the iPhone, yeah, wonderful invention. I said, no, it's the little timer on the iPhone that tells you when to shut up. That's the best invention of all time. I'm going to talk about Adam Smith because this is a very important year, indeed a very important week. Yeah, wait a minute. There we go. Because 250 years ago this week, Adam Smith published his famous book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And he came up with lots of prescriptions for economic growth and for warnings about things that wouldn't produce growth. So it's an important year, and there we are. Thank you. How do I advance that? Down. That one, right? Yeah, I have to ask. You see, because as you can tell, I'm very old. I'm very old because I wear a tie. I'm slightly deaf, and I can spell. So I'm going to talk about Adam Smith, and I am old, but I didn't know Adam Smith personally, I should point out. But people often ask me, should I read The Wealth of Nations? And I say, don't be so daft, right? It's 800 pages of 18th century prose, and you'll get stuck on page 3. So what you should do is to read my cartoon version instead, and here it is, the cartoon Wealth of Nations. Sorry, we're here to discuss important economic concepts, but I think a little bit of self-promotion is okay. And the first thing that Adam Smith recommended is to promote free markets. Don't try and read all the words, I'm just putting them up for fun. And he believed in free markets because he felt that when people pursue their own interests in the marketplace, curiously, this produces a social good. That it's not from the benevolence of the butcher and the brewer and the baker that we get our dinner, but from their regard to their self-interest. And in a market economy, provided you have proper rules of justice and fair play and of contract and things like that, then curiously it produces a social good. It produces a healthy society. It produces a burgeoning economy rather than the stagnation that we saw under socialism. So I think the lessons there, and there's no need for central direction in any of this. So I think the lessons there that Adam Smith is telling us is to promote competition, embrace self-interest as a driver of the economy, and reduce entry barriers to people who want to come in, entrepreneurs that Chris is going to talk about, want to come in and do things in a new way. The second thing he recommends, again, don't read the words, but is to limit government intervention. Bismarck, the German Chancellor Bismarck, once said, if you like laws and sausages, you should never watch either being made. And certainly I know that Dan, who's been in Washington for 40 years, and me, who's been in Westminster for 40 years, we've seen laws made, and it's a very nasty, horrible, gruesome process, and don't expect it to produce a rational result. I think too many economists think that all they've got to do is come up with good ideas, and then the politicians will do them. Well, they won't. No, they won't. There are lots of pressures on politicians, and they're going to do the opposite of what you thought. I've seen it so many times. Controls, tariffs, government intervention, all of this thwarts the market. It thwarts competition. And government should focus, says Adam Smith, on producing defense, security, and a little bit of infrastructure that's needed to make the economy work. But apart from that, no, it shouldn't really be doing these things. And he'd be really shocked to see if he came back and saw the size of our governments today. So that means minimizing taxes. Darwin's going to speak about that. There's Ben Franklin, the American founder, once said that there are two certainties in life, death and taxes. But my line is that, unfortunately, they come in the wrong order. Anyway, the third thing which Adam Smith advocated was free trade. He lived in an age of colonialism, of course. And he thought that because countries were diverse, they could exchange very usefully, that they could generate more value. There's no point in growing grapes in rainy Scotland, he said, when you can buy them at a 30th of the price from sunny France. So by focusing on what we do well and then exchanging our produce, exchanging our excess with other people, that will benefit both sides. And it's a crucial insight in Adam Smith that trade benefits both sides. Everybody in his time thought that trade was a zero-sum game. And I think probably President Trump probably thinks it's a zero-sum game, that you can only get rich if somebody else gets poorer, if you take money from somebody else. That's not true. You know, see kids in a playground swapping toys and games and things like that. They both consider themselves better off by the swap. You know, nothing's been created, but it's just that each of them has got more value out of what it is that they own. And that is the great merit of free trade. I don't need to go much more into free trade because we've done that quite a bit. The next thing that Adam Smith talks about is encouraging specialization, what he called the division of labor. And he says that multiplies productivity hugely. And he takes the example of a pin factory and says, well, if you or I try to make a pin, you know, we might make a couple a day, but you've got 18 guys in a pin factory, and they're all doing just one single job. You know, one's pulling the wire, one's sharpening the wire, one's putting the head on, one's whitening them, one's putting them in a box. And they get very skilled at doing that. And they can employ specialist equipment at doing that. So he's saying that these 18 people can produce 48,000 pins in a day, 18 of them. It's an amazing multiplication, 1,000-fold multiplication in productivity. And we see that, of course, everywhere today in the market economy, that you have specialist firms, hugely more efficient than you and I could do it ourselves. So why bother to do it yourself? Why not buy it in from other people? So I think the lessons for today are that we should allow businesses to specialize freely. We need to invest in education so that people can see the opportunities that might come from specialization, setting up new businesses, being entrepreneurs, and so on. And allow individuals to pursue the vocations that they want to pursue. There's another important thing in Adam Smith, which is the moral foundation. He mentions this in his other book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which came first and made him famous, actually. That the economic activity rests on a moral foundation. If you don't have that, then it won't work. Human beings have a certain empathy to each other. They want to be liked by other people. They want to do the right thing. So you need a system of justice, honesty, contract, these kind of things. And when you have that, then the market economy works. And competition is your best regulator. Competition is the thing that keeps everybody on their toes, and it makes sure that there's a benefit to people for producing stuff that's better, faster, cheaper, and that benefits the whole community. So the free market economy is very much based on moral foundations. And so I think the lessons there today are that we should set businesses free, not try to regulate them too much, that we should tackle monopolies, tackle government subsidies and things like that. And we should promote self-improvement and all of these beneficial moral dimensions. So there's the conclusions: make markets free, limit the role of government, liberate trade and commerce, facilitate specialization, insist on justice and economy and honesty in economic life. Adam Smith famously wrote to a friend saying, nothing is needed to take a country from the lowest barbarism, he says, to the highest opulence, the greatest prosperity, but peace, low taxes, and justice. And, you know, I don't want to leave you on a down note, but I will. When you look around the world, have we got peace? Have we got low taxes? Definitely not. Have we got justice? Some places we have, some places we haven't. So I think Adam Smith's fundamental moral is that you've got to get those fundamentals right before you can do anything positive with them. Thank you very much indeed.
Our next speaker is Darren Friend, who comes from the Taxpayers Alliance and is responsible for leading the research team. He was previously a research and a policy analyst before working in propositions for a fintech firm. Before joining the TPA, Darren spent a period working as a researcher for an MP. He graduated in 2019 with a degree in philosophy, politics, and economics from the University of East Anglia. So he is one of the our youngest speakers, so most close to you students, so give him a big applause.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Cheers. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here, as was mentioned earlier, for my first time in Zagreb to discuss what is one of the defining economic challenges facing all of us across Europe right now, especially here in Croatia as well, which is how we escape stagnation and achieve stronger economic growth. Now, as Marta mentioned, I represent the Taxpayers Alliance in the United Kingdom as its research director. And you'll probably be unsurprised to hear that our core belief is actually quite a simple one, that lower and simpler taxes are one of the most reliable routes to achieving stronger economic growth, which is what I'm going to base my remarks on today. Now, across Europe, as I mentioned, we're all facing quite a similar problem, economic stagnation. Because growth in all of our countries since the financial crisis, and especially after the coronavirus pandemic, has seen growth slow, investment has weakened, and productivity growth has generally been disappointing. Now, governments often respond to these pressures by focusing on how to raise more revenue and how to spend more taxpayers' money. But the more fundamental question that they should be asking themselves all the time is how they can use tax systems to support economic growth while still generating the revenues to fund essential public services we all think they should provide. Because economic growth is what ultimately makes public finances sustainable and all of us as individuals better off at the same time. Now, in certain parts of the political debate, there is a widespread assumption that lower taxes automatically must mean lower tax revenues as a result. But experience shows us this is not always the case. And my country provides a useful example of the Laffer curve in action. Between 2010 and 2017, the main rate of corporation tax was reduced from 28% down to 19%. Now, despite these substantial reductions and warnings from some people in politics that this would mean corporation tax revenues would fall, what we actually saw was corporation tax revenues increase as a share of GDP in the years that followed this reduction. And the reason for this was quite simple. Lower rates encouraged investment and business activity in the UK, which in turn helped to expand the tax base as a result. So when companies are in a position to be able to invest more, thanks to the tax system, profits can rise. And when profits can rise, tax revenues can rise at the same time, even if the rate of the tax is lower than before. Which demonstrates an important principle all of us need to be aware of. Tax policy doesn't exist on its own. It affects the behaviours of individuals and businesses at the same time. Countries with competitive tax regimes are those that attract capital and investment, which is why that example I just gave was so successful in my country in raising additional revenues. And now that our government's increased the corporation tax revenue up to 25%, revenues haven't grown at a similar rate. And over the time the investment that is brought in through these lower rates comes in, that generates the revenues governments can rely on to fund the public services we all want. So tax rates are one key element of what goes on. But tax simplicity, in my opinion, is just as important. Because if you have a complex tax system, it imposes large and often hidden costs on both governments and also businesses. And that stifles growth as a result because it's making business more difficult to do. In the United Kingdom, our National Audit Office found that businesses spend around about £15 billion every year just complying with the tax rules the government imposes on them, with the Audit Office actually saying the true cost is far likely to be even higher than that. And the reason for this is because when you have a complex tax system, it forces firms to hire accountants and advisors, invest in costly compliance systems, and also devote management time to administration rather than to driving growth in those businesses. The real economic costs then impact all of us because they reduce productivity, they discourage business expansion, and they make all of our economies less dynamic as a result. And this doesn't just occur in the UK. I'm afraid Dan's gone, but in the US, a similar thing happens there. Their Internal Revenue Service suggested that the cost of complying with the federal income tax, just one form of tax on its own, is enormous. In 2022, they said that the average taxpayer in the US spends around about 13 hours and $250 every year just preparing their tax return. Now, with around about 158 million tax returns filed, that means Americans spent more than $40 billion and roughly 2 billion hours in total each year just complying with the individual income tax code. And those billions of hours and tens of billions of dollars represent lost economic output. Because time spent navigating those complex tax rules is time that could be better spent working, innovating, or building businesses that ultimately deliver growth for us. Now, there are countries that break this rule. And one of the clearest examples of both a simple but also a competitive taxation regime is Estonia. Estonia has ranked first in the Tax Foundation's International Tax Competitiveness Index for 12 straight years now. And the reason for that is because after regaining independence back in 1991, Estonia's government built its economic model purposely around growth and driving investment into the economy. And a key part of that strategy was creating a predictable and simple tax system to encourage that. So in Estonia, their income tax model operates at a flat rate of 22%, which is applied equally to employment income, investment income, and pension income. So someone earning the equivalent of 20,000 euros will pay the same rate of tax as someone earning 1 million euros. The system is both transparent and also easy to understand both at an individual and a business level. Think how different that is to most of us across Europe right now, where we have enacted progressive tax systems, but that drives up complication. Estonia also taxes corporate income in a different way to most of our countries. Instead of taxing all profits, as traditional corporation taxes do, Estonia only taxes the distributed profits made by companies. Again, showing the simplicity of this system, that's also done at a rate of 22%. And the reason they've done this is because it encourages reinvestment of earnings and therefore expansion. As the OECD has found, corporate taxes tend to be among the most damaging form of tax when you're trying to drive economic growth in a country, which when you think about it is understandable, because when a government is taxing profits, it means those tax profits can't be reinvested into a business to generate further growth and therefore further tax revenues in future for the government. So Estonia's approach has purposely been to reduce that damage while still generating revenue on the redistributed profits. And the overall result of their tax system has been that it is both competitive and also efficient. So Estonia shows us that a growth-oriented tax reform is both achievable but also desirable even for relatively small economies. But again, tax policy alone isn't the only thing that is driving down growth in our countries, because it can't be separated away from government spending. Because ultimately, all of our tax burdens are determined by the level of spending all of our governments choose to sustain on our behalf. Research my organisation did into the growth maximising level of public spending as a percentage of GDP suggests it lands roughly between 17.5% and 22.5% of GDP. The welfare maximising range we found lies roughly between 27.5% and 32.5%. And as part of our research, what we did is we looked at what would happen if you moved spending as a percentage of GDP, which in the UK right now is around about 45% of GDP, down to that welfare maximising level. And if you did that, long-run growth, we've forecast, would be roughly 1 percentage point higher than it currently is expected to be. If you reduced it down further, though, towards that growth maximising level, it would be a further 0.8 percentage points larger as well. Now, whilst in economics all forecasts are obviously approximate, the evidence from multiple studies, including ours, suggests effects of this general magnitude, which means the implication for policy makers is a straightforward one. Governments that can control their spending gain the ability to reduce their tax burdens. And as I've already mentioned, lower tax burdens can support stronger economic growth. So across Europe today, restoring sustainable growth to our economies is going to require our politicians to first regain control of public spending and then use the funds from that to reduce the pressure for ever higher taxes. But I've only mentioned corporation tax so far as a specific tax, and economic growth depends on the total tax burden on productive activity. Businesses and workers, as you would all find out when you eventually go into the world of work, respond to the combined impact of taxation, not just a single form of it. So that's the combined impact of income taxes, social contributions, corporate taxes, capital taxes, and consumption taxes. Because if the overall tax burden becomes too heavy, investment slows and labour supply weakens. But as I've mentioned, lower taxes create the incentives and rewards to work, save and invest. Simpler taxes reduce the cost of economic activity, so time and funds can be better spent more efficiently. And together, they both expand the productive capacity of the economy, which is what we're all looking for. So, to conclude, escaping stagnation is going to require our governments to recognise what is a simple reality, I'm sure for most of us in this room. Growth, in part, depends on the incentives governments give to businesses and individuals to actually produce that growth. Lower taxes will help increase the rewards of work and investment. Simpler taxes will reduce the cost of economic activity for businesses, meaning they can hire more people with those funds instead. And disciplined public spending will make lower taxes and simpler taxes possible. Now, obviously, the differences, it will differ between country to country. The makeup of the British economy is fundamentally different to the Croatian economy. But the principle that I'm speaking about today is a universal one. Stronger growth comes from economies that decide to reward enterprise rather than try to penalise it. And lower and simpler taxes are among the most reliable foundations for achieving that higher growth. So if that is the problem, the answer we should take away from today is first, our politicians need to control spending. Second, they need to simplify their tax codes so it's more business friendly. And third, they need to cut or abolish growth-harming taxes. Thank you very much.
And our third speaker is our champion of free market roadshow Zagreb, because he was the most times coming to Zagreb. Thank you, Chris, on that. So Chris is a visiting senior fellow at American Institute for Economic Research, visiting professor of economics at Guatemala, research scholar in New Delhi, international political advisor for the Asian Institute for Diplomacy and International Affairs at Kathmandu, international senior fellow at Property Rights Institute in USA, senior fellow at Center for Market Education, Malaysia, and senior visiting fellow at Sri Lanka. So, gentlemen, you see all of the world and Zagreb, and Chris,
thank you.
Floor is yours.
Great to be back. You live in a wonderful city. Beautiful architecture, excellent food, beautiful women, things I like. But you know, it didn't just happen. This place became a mecca for entrepreneurs at one moment before the sort of disease of the concepts of collectives being over the individual. Marxism, socialism, communism comes under social democracy, comes under many different guises. But the real motivator of most of the things that we really like come from people like you, entrepreneurs. And I was really pleased to see that this institution is trying to sort of develop in your mind the value to all of us of the entrepreneur. Now, all of us love movie stars, sports stars, performers, but they really only affect one part of our life. Football, our team wins. That's only one part of our life. But entrepreneurs affect every aspect of human progress. Not just economics, but cultural, social, and so on. Every aspect of what we really like to see about living in the future comes from entrepreneurs. It's because the entrepreneur is someone who tries to create value that didn't exist previously. Nobody knew they wanted a phone that you could put in your pocket and walk around with when I was your age. Nobody imagined it. But somebody came up with this idea. And people would have said, oh, why would you want a phone in your pocket? You have one sitting on the desk. These entrepreneurs accept this sort of risk to give you something you did not know you wanted. You did not know you wanted it because it wasn't there before. They take the risk. They take the chance. Oh, maybe if I create this, maybe someone will buy it. Someone will value it. So I want to talk about how this whole process, this actually, if the feminists will forgive me, the forgotten man. And usually when we say man, we mean human or humans. But the entrepreneur is in some way not valued in the same way that a sports star is. We think, the 1%, you know that expression. The 1%, we need to tax them. We need to take away from them to give to other people. Well, those are the entrepreneurs. Now, how did they get to be in the 1%? It's called globalization. If you are the single most successful entrepreneur in Zagreb, you'd be rich. The single most successful in Croatia, you'd be richer. In Europe, very rich. In the world, very, very, very rich. It's not your fault. You just simply have a bigger market. And this is what's happened over time. And so, but we say, but how can Elon Musk have more money or more net worth than a country? Well, because the products that he creates have value in your mind, and you reward him voluntarily. Nobody has to buy from Elon Musk or from Jeff Bezos or from Jack Ma, whoever we want to look at. These people become, in some ways, obscenely rich, much richer than me. But I don't care. You gave them voluntarily the income that they have. Okay, now this is, no, I have it here. Well, it is. Anyway, this is what I'm going to do, trying to talk about these things. Because it's our way out of stagnation. The European Union and the European leaders, they don't care. Hey, they've got a good life. They've got their Armani suits, they're drinking champagne, and they're taxing the rich, and they have a good life. They don't really care about you. That's how they get you to vote for them. They pretend like they care about you. The entrepreneur may dislike you. It doesn't matter. If he creates something you value, you will trade with them. You will reward them. Unfortunately, we tend to think that politicians are the ones that really guarantee our safety, our prosperity. No. They are, in many ways, the biggest enemies of progress. Protectionism, tariffs, these policies that were talked about by other speakers. As though they affect and benefit the citizens. They don't. They protect a special interest group. What's the biggest group of people in any country? Consumers. You're not a worker. The people that are retired aren't workers. The people that are in... everybody is a consumer. If you have an economic policy that protects the workers as a general concept, or the steel workers as a specific group, you're neglecting the interests of the masses. This is what we should care about. And this is where the entrepreneur comes in, because the entrepreneur provides the things that you did not know you wanted. This is amazing. These are exceptional people. Now, to be a good economist, you have to understand scarcity. So going back to Bastiat, the reason that most politicians and many people that are in public life, they really don't understand scarcity. And so they implement policies that try to ignore scarcity. So what we find is that scarcity really creates this sort of conflict over what we have. You know, the plastic to make this could be used to make something else. This is what scarcity does. So what we need to do is find a way to resolve this, to have a social order. So the social order is really about resolving conflicts over using things. Now, we could rely on some elite politicians, the EU, for example, the bureaucrats in Brussels, whoever, in Washington. Now, what do? They use violence. Well, violence, if you don't pay your taxes, they'll come and arrest you. If you resist, they can kill you. Literally. They don't have to do that, but they have that possibility. And they are immune from prosecution, unless they, of course, overstep their bounds. But if they're doing it in the pursuit of, public policy, it's okay. Theft. Well, many of us here think that taxation is a form of theft, because taxation is almost invariably not voluntary, which is like what theft is. Theft is, I take from you and you didn't want to give it to me. Well, that's what taxation is. I take from you and you'd rather spend it on your children, your parents, your friends, yourself. Slavery. You don't have conscription. I was conscripted. I was forced to go into the army at the expense of I would be otherwise go to jail or go to Canada. So I was a slave to the state. As a soldier, I became a captain. Now, on the other side is the domain where we begin to look for entrepreneurs. This is a much more peaceful setting, because the entrepreneur has to say, hey, buy this from me. No, please, I have this. This is not, you look, oh, I like your shoes. They have to encourage you. They have to coax you to do things in order to trade. So I have this, I want what you have, which is money in most cases. So we have to cooperate. This is different from political interactions. So the market is a much more peaceful place where people are trading and cooperating. Whereas in the political arena, it's pretty ugly. You're forced to help other people. In the market, you're asked to help one another. This is a better arrangement, I would suggest. So, how do we get a good social order? Well, that is where we begin to talk about morality and justice. Now, one other thing that makes you a good economist is that you understand how important incentives are, because incentives are what motivate people to do good things or bad things. So if the incentives encourage bad behavior, like stealing from other people or ignoring that they're doing that, then you'll get more of that. So the problem is these incentives are rewards on the good side, punishments on the bad side, and they lead to results. So you can get, if you want good outcomes, you have to have good incentives. You have to encourage people to do things that will help other people. What helps other people? Providing them something they value so that they will reward you voluntarily in exchange through trade and cooperation. Now, most of us that have spoken so far believe that the way for your future to be a future of prosperity, so that Croatians or you as individuals will have a better future. And that's going to be through having more freedom and more property rights. And that's, again, entrepreneurs do not function as well unless they have freedom to decide what you don't know you want. And they have property rights, they have ownership rights over the means of production, which they might purchase from you, or their inputs. And so we really need to be cautious about political demands that we give up our freedom and that we give up our property rights. Whether it's for climate change, whether it's for the environment, whether it's for social justice or some sort of vague reference. Nobody has an objective. There is no objective definition for social justice. Justice doesn't require an adjective. Justice is justice. And the only thing that I know, now you may know something different, the only justice is an outcome that comes through voluntary interaction and cooperation. That's a just outcome. A trade, a voluntary trade is a just outcome, an outcome that satisfies justice. All these other things are very vague to me. Now, lawyers will tell you one thing, politicians will tell you other things. But this is all I know. Maybe because I'm an economist. But I focus on that. So, now, I stress this. Entrepreneurs create unknown value. We didn't know we wanted a phone. Somebody had to come up with the idea. And not convince us. You know, actually, I had the original Nokia. A friend of mine, oh, you need to get a smartphone. So what do I'm sending, text messages with I don't need all of that. I had a PhD in economics. I didn't know I couldn't live without this until I got one. Somebody had to figure that out. So, this is where dynamism comes from. Dynamism doesn't come from political agents. Political agents are trying to freeze us into relationships that benefit some particular special interest group, because that's what democracy is about. Democracy is about gaining the support of the most people. And the best way to do that is to take from him to give to him, and him, so that they support you. So, oh, he's giving me something, but you forget you had to take it from him. That's unjust. Why should he support them? What did they do that he... Now, they're not his children. They're not his family. What is the moral basis of that transfer? There's no moral basis. There's a political basis. Democracy. Winning the most votes. Entrepreneur. That is really... The entrepreneur is searching for just outcomes. Outcomes that satisfy this idea of justice. Now, what do? Well, as I mentioned, the reason markets are dynamic, the reason we're not using dial telephones is because of entrepreneurs. They're also the source of progress in other areas, as I mentioned. Now, this discovery process is really trial and error. Now, some entrepreneurs are in the 1%, but if you go and look at many of them, they tried and failed. They tried and failed. They tried and failed. And maybe they gave up. But the ones that tried again, success. So we should not look down on entrepreneurs, because there are people that have, in many cases, I don't know, I remember when I was quite young, I had a friend that was entrepreneurial. He was always finding ways to make a little bit extra. I didn't really like him because of that, because I didn't see the other side. I just saw this sort of, guy that was always trying to grab something. But it only happened because people voluntarily, gave him what he wanted, and he gave them what they wanted. Now, there was no design that he followed. He just experimented with things until he found one that worked. So, the interesting thing, I don't think you can teach entrepreneurship. You can teach, I think, it's my view. Because anyway, most entrepreneurs don't even value what they do for society. They value what they can do for themselves and for their family. They don't have to care about you. But they have to give you something you want, which makes you better off. So, do you want a politician who says, I'm going to make you better off by taking from him, or someone that makes you better off because you feel like you want to buy something that they offer you? That's a much better outcome. So, how do we know what should be produced? Well, we don't know. In many cases, food, of course, but maybe a different type of food. Fusion cuisine, where you mix Japanese with Mexican or something. Nobody knew they wanted that until somebody tried it. So we have to understand that consumer sovereignty, that is, we the consumer, we must respect their decisions. Why? Because they're given voluntarily. Right? Nobody makes you go to McDonald's. You can go to a shawarma place. You can go... No. But you choose to go where you like to go. We really... And this is one thing. We say, people have bad taste. We shouldn't trust the taste of consumers. Well, why? Whose judgment is that? Is that your judgment as an elite, or their judgment as someone who knows what their values are? Now, on the other side, there's what we call caveat emptor. In other words, the buyer has some responsibility in that process. If you're buying fentanyl as opposed to aspirin, in a free market, you would say, "Wow, I don't want fentanyl," unless you do want it. But in a corrupt market, you might, somebody will, because they're not held responsible, and because you're not held responsible. So caveat emptor is part of this process. The costs. Costs are driven by your demand. The reason oil is so expensive is because you want it for your car, through being refined into gasoline or diesel. Without that, it would be not very expensive, right? It's your decisions about what you want that actually drive the pricing of things that you purchase. So if a lot of you want it, prices tend to go up because of scarcity. So, now entrepreneurs want to be monopolists, but the market won't let them. The market, Anybody take physics? Did you ever take physics? There's an expression in physics. Nature hates a vacuum. So if you have a vacuum in nature, it'll either be filled by gas, water, or something, right? Vacuums don't exist in nature. Well, markets hate monopoly. Why? Well, if it's a competitive market, you're making a lot of money, I'm going to compete with you. I'm going to imitate you. I'm going to sell at a lower price. And then, technology. Technology changes. You know, at one time there was a telephone monopoly. There was only one telephone provider in all of Croatia, probably a government agency. And now, Oppo, Samsung, Apple, whatever. Competition. Competition destroys monopoly. This is what markets do. Now, prosperity requires that there be economic growth. And economic growth requires entrepreneurs. And so you're being trained, at least, you know, maybe, and a lot of you maybe want to be an entrepreneur, and many of you won't be successful because you won't find that thing that other people cannot live without. And that's what makes you rich. That's what makes you successful. Now, so we have to understand this. And this is what was lost. Karl Marx was a genius. He was an intellectual. He was a lot of other things, but he really was not an economist because he did not understand scarcity. He didn't build it into his system. He said, there's misery. Industrialization has caused misery. Why did workers go into these horrible factories with terrible working conditions? Voluntarily. They weren't dragooned or enslaved. They went in. Why? Because the alternatives of dying of starvation as a peasant made it better to take your chances in a factory. Karl Marx couldn't understand these kind of things. He got lost in his brilliant sort of philosophical constructs that weren't based on reality. They were based upon his images, his interpretations. And he never had a job. Well, he wrote for a newspaper. Well, that's not really a job. I used to write for newspapers. But he never started a business. He never hired people. He never fired people. He never had to accumulate capital to buy equipment. He didn't understand what entrepreneurs have to do and how difficult it is to be a successful entrepreneur. So, we have to have property rights because property rights, market transactions are transfer of property rights. You buy this from me, we trade property rights. I get your money, you get my thing. So, if you don't have property rights, prices will not really make sense. This is where I forgot to set my timer. Let me know. Yeah. Time up? Okay. I forgot to set my... Anyway, I like to talk. So, you may have seen that. Now, one last thing I'll say. The competition in markets is that Apple is competing with Samsung to cooperate with you. And you are competing with the other person to buy that phone, that Apple. So what we see is that competition is not between buyer and seller. Competition is between seller and buyer. This is what the market is. We have people on one side competing with each other to get something, and we have people on the other side, the entrepreneurs, the producers, that are competing with their rivals to sell you something. But people, again, this sort of demonization of successful entrepreneurs is really misguided because it overlooks this process of value creation, which is really what being an entrepreneur is about. Creating value in the minds of consumers, something that they did not know they wanted until they saw it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Chris. I would ask our speakers to sit on a panel discussion. So, because we are beyond schedule, so I will just take questions from the audience. So please, if you prepare your questions for our distinguished guests, who would like to have a question for some of our speakers? Somebody from this side, maybe? Robin? Oh, Robin will have one. Be loud.
Darwin, I'm sure you're right that public expenditure as a share of GDP ought to go on down to 30% or lower. But it's not easy. And of course, it's easier if you have some growth. But it's one of these circles. How do you start off with? I mean, a stagnating economy is very difficult to cut public expenditure. But even in those circumstances, presumably you have to have your priorities. What would be your priorities for reducing public expenditure as a share of GDP in order to bring down taxation and borrowing?
In the UK context, thank you. In the UK context, the two areas that I'd really focus on. First is benefits. So one of the largest areas of government spending in the United Kingdom is on benefits expenditures to those who either can't work or can't work full time. The issue is, especially post the pandemic, is a lot of people are now claiming benefits who wouldn't traditionally be considered worthy of receiving them in return, because it could be the United Kingdom is now given parity, for example, between mental health conditions and physical health conditions. For example, I think we need to return to the pre-pandemic level where we were primarily focused on supporting those with physical impairments who can't go to work, because when you have significant amounts of expenditure on people who can't go to work for potentially, and there is some rigging of the system in the United Kingdom of some people having very mild mental health conditions, then it means that both the number of people in work goes down, but also the cost of actually providing for those on benefits rises as well. The other area I think we also need to focus on, and this is becoming extremely important, I think, across all of our countries, is on pensioner payments as well. Because at the minute, demographics show that the number of pensioners... You'll be all right, Eamon, you'll be all right, I promise. But the demography is showing that the number of pensioners is growing, whilst the number of people in work is shrinking. And those that are actually coming up behind them, young people who aren't in work yet, that group is shrinking at the same time as well. So if we're fundamentally going to make our pensioner system affordable so that then people like me can eventually receive my state pension if it's still going to exist at that time, then it's going to require actually changing the system from what it currently is. We currently have a pension system which locks in effectively that every year there's going to be a rise, either by 2.5% or by earnings growth, whichever one of those is higher. And what that's locking in is higher costs for those in work at the same time as the number of people in work is shrinking. So I think firstly I'd prioritise benefits and pensioner payments, and then subsequently with those increased funds hopefully reduce the pressure on the tax burden, because in the UK, I'm sure as you're aware, it's going up to a record high post the Second World War as of April next year. So we do need to fix that if we're going to start becoming more of a competitive economy once again.
Thank you. Somebody from students, do you have a question for our... Okay, thank you. Just say your name and loud question.
Hi, my name is Ivan. Is this on? My name is Ivan. I'm a student here, first year student. And my question is for the last gentleman that that had the presentation. You mentioned respecting consumer choice and sovereignty. And I want to ask you, what do you think? What is the limit to that, like the moral limit? How much responsibility does the seller have in terms of what is good for the consumer? Like my example would be drugs.
You know, in most transactions, the government's not involved. I mean, almost every transaction we engage in on any given day, there's no direct involvement of government. The markets actually create incentives for us to, I want you to survive our trade because I want you to buy again from me. And this kind of incentive within a market context is much more beneficial than the government regulations that are trying to, on the basis of some elite ideal, usually protecting some special interest group. So they have a regulation that's supposed to protect us. Now, even with food, in America we have the Food and Drug Administration. Now, why was it created? Well, the drug companies and the food producers wanted the government to step in to restrict competition. So, I mean, we say, oh, but they protect us. Well, no, they protect those sellers more than they protect the consumers, because people get dysentery from eating bad food or whatever. I mean, these things happen. I mean, they're outliers, but they do happen, even with government regulations. So, drug overdoses or, thalidomide. There were, drugs that pass all the tests that government had, but that they destroyed human life. So I would rather trust the market to decide, and the market being you and me, than an elite that is detached from that transaction, and actually detached in a general sense from reality, because they're not affected by it. They're not much affected by it. They actually gain by taking away resources from you, choices from you, your freedom. It gives them more power, gives them more prestige, and it gives them access to financial resources. So I think consumers have to be cautious, and most of you are. I mean, when was the last time you went back to a restaurant that made you sick? You won't do it. Now, if it killed you, you don't go back in any restaurant. But that doesn't happen very often.
A reply from... Let me give you an Adam Smith answer to your question. Most people in this world are perfectly honest, normal, decent people, human beings. They don't want to cause injury and upset to other people, right? There are a few who don't care. Most people who want to make millions don't actually go into drug running or arms running or gambling and prostitution and all of these things. They want to produce goods and services that people want, that people love, in fact. And I've known many, many entrepreneurs, and all of them just love what they do, because what they do changes people's lives. The iPhone changes the lives of billions of people around the planet. So have some faith in humanity. Right, yes, if there are people who sell drugs that are fake and all the rest of it, yeah, okay, they should suffer the consequences. But most people, let them get on with it. And competition will regulate the market better than you or I ever could.
Thank you. We should finish with this panel. I thank to our guests and speakers. Another question. Okay, you scared me. So we are going to have now a 5-minute pause, and then we will continue with the third topic, which is the impact of AI on business and jobs. So I think that will interest you more. So your dean is going to have a presentation, Mr. Bakic, and and Mr. Turk. So in 5 minutes, we start with the third panel.
Thank you to everyone, especially my students who stayed till the end. I think the most interesting topic, or they were all extremely interesting, but most pertinent to your generation and what is happening right now is, of course, AI. And we're going to discuss the impact of AI on business and jobs, what are the opportunities and risks, with our esteemed guests. Professor Turk, our top entrepreneur, Mr. Bakic, and our dean. So the dean will open because our school is somewhat connected to AI. and it is intimately connected to it in a way. And then I will give the floor to the other two panelists to deliver their short presentations. And then we're going to take some hopefully controversial questions. Please.
Thank you, Vedana. Thank you. Yeah, I have to tell you, as somebody who's trying to follow the AI scene, even though it sometimes feel a lot like, drinking water from the fire hose because the development is so fast, I have to tell you, I'm thinking, will an institution such as ours exist in 10, 15 years, there is probably very few sectors that have changed as little as higher education in general in the world. The system, the way it works, if you're studying, not obviously here at Zagreb School of Economics and Management because we're different, but if you study at a big public university in anywhere in Europe for that matter, you go, the way your experience is as a student is probably not much different than 100 years ago. You come in a big room, professor tells something, there's like 400 people. So it's a sector ripe for disruption. I will tell you, if you ask me what I believe the future of that sector is, I'll tell you during the Q&A. I don't want to talk too much about that, but I do want to talk about, I want to give you a few ideas. First of all, I want to talk briefly about AI and how to think about it if I were you, because your generation is actually at the same time extremely lucky and unlucky. So if you play your cards right, if you use the opportunities well, then you are probably born at exactly the luckiest time to be alive, because the revolution that is about to unfold presents enormous opportunities exactly to you, people who are studying, for instance, at Zagreb School of Economics and Management, future entrepreneurs, because what this technology will enable you. It will empower you if you use it in the right way. I'm just going to give you, I don't know if anybody saw, there's so many examples, but the last one I saw is ByteDance, the Chinese holding company of TikTok. They I think, a few days ago, they released their latest video generator tool, and essentially, with a couple of simple prompts, you would get the result that Martin Scorsese, probably one of the best directors alive, had to spend months, if not more, and hundreds of millions of dollars to produce, which essentially means that every one of you could now, with a little bit of creativity, become a director of your own movie. Examples such as this one abound. There's many of them. Tasks that engineers had to spend months working on are now reduced to a couple of minutes. So this is going to shift everything, and the way you position yourself in this upcoming revolution will make the difference between success and failure. So how many of you are playing daily with AI on it? Yeah. Okay. You too, right? Everybody. You need to be doing it. You need to be doing it non-stop. You need to be doing it all the time. The analogy I like to use for the relevance of AI is if you go back, 200-300 years before Christ, the most powerful man in the world was Alexander the Great, right? So who did he choose as his personal mentor, teacher? Anybody? Who was? Aristotle, exactly, the smartest, wisest man alive. With AI, every one of you will have now Aristotle in the palm of your hand, so it's a truly path-breaking technology. And your generation, you're still young enough to take advantage of it, to get really proficient in all of it, to try to follow it non-stop, and to use it for your entrepreneurial endeavors. The title of my speech was AI, Security, and Energy. And after kind of emphasizing this AI point, I was listening to all the presentations today, and the speakers were talking about the importance of entrepreneurs, the importance of free markets, of course. One thing, that it reminded me of was this story of what really economists are. Who are economists? And I was reminded of this quote by U.S. President, I think it was Harry Truman, who at one point said, can somebody please give me, I don't know if Vedana, you ever told them the story, a one-armed economist, because economics, exactly, on the one hand, on the other hand, essentially meaning that economics is, as somebody already correctly pointed out, the science of determining, or arts and science of determining how to efficiently, effectively allocate limited resources, because there's always, we don't live in a world of abundant resources. So when we talk about AI, there is also, there's this need for balance, okay? And what do I mean by that? Yes, do we need a big state or a small state? What is the role of the state is essentially the center of the question that we are discussing here today. All the most famous entrepreneurs that you know of, whether it's, I don't know, Steve Jobs working on Apple in his garage, would they really succeed if there wasn't an important role of state in deploying capital in parts of research that would be considered too risky for private sector? Yes, I mean they would not exist. And there's this whole Vedana knows. I don't know if you mentioned her in your classes, but Mariana Mazzucato, the type of state we don't need a small state or a big state. We need smart state, entrepreneurial state. You all know that most of the underlying technology that was used to build companies like Uber, Microsoft, Apple was actually built on the basis of technology that came as a result of massive multi-billion-dollar research during the Cold War, usually connected to military funding. So we need, we need a smart state, but we need a free market also. And finally, and I will just maybe end on this because I don't want to take too much of your time. Your generation is the luckiest one, but you also live in interesting times in the sense that if we think about Europe and take EU as a kind of an example, EU represents roughly 4 to 5% of global population, but it accounts for around 25% of global social welfare spending. Okay, and this is something to consider whether this European social, let's say, contract is really sustainable. It probably is not, given the demographic picture. So your generation will be there to see how it really all unfolds. And we talked a lot about security, geopolitics before. When you look at the way Americans think, especially under this administration, you can, if you look at it from a different U.S. perspective, which is us in the U.S., we're spending all this money to have military bases all over the world. Germany is full of military bases. I don't know, Japan, Middle East, Gulf. But let's focus on Europe. There's all these military bases in Europe, and we're doing it so that the Europeans can spend 1% for defense. So we're essentially subsidizing their nice Dolce Vita. From American perspective, if you put it like that, many of the things that they're doing now stop looking so irrational. Actually, from the U.S. perspective, it's like, hey, you guys should take care of yourself. You should take a little bit more agency for yourself. Don't just depend on us. Why would we be? So keep that realistic outlook on the world in mind. Especially now, if we go down from Europe to Croatia, for small countries, the realistic outlook is crucial, because if you're not realistic about the world, you will not exist for a very long time. You will be eventually absorbed in some other. So small countries only exist if they have a very realistic, pragmatic outlook on the world. And I will close with, for instance, one aspect where Europe did not have this realistic outlook on the world is energy, and we all know how that played out. And if you want to be a player in the AI scene, you need to have energy, right? So US has taken care of and is taking care of its energy. China is taking care of its energy. China has more, I don't know, China is building nuclear power plants. China has more renewable capacity installed than the rest of the world combined. Europe has taken a very idealistic, non-pragmatic, non-realistic view on energy, and we are in a massive problem. This is also one of the reasons why it's not very realistic to expect us to be a major player in the AI, except for the fact that we can play in the application of AI, but not so much in development of fundamental models and all that, because that requires a lot of energy, which Europe does not have. At the same time, Croatia today, 2026, there has never been better time in history to be a Croat or live in Croatia. So you also have to have that optimistic outlook. So just some food for thought before I turn my microphone, which is not really a microphone because it does not make my voice louder. I think it just records it. Before I turn it to the next speaker, okay? Thank you, Mate. Please.
Thank you, Dedin. I would now kindly ask Mr. Bakic to deliver his presentation. Please.
Hvala, thank you. Imam ovaj. The issue I'd like to talk about is that everything we are talking about might be obsolete, in fact, but probably the deepest layer might not be, and this is the values. We as people who understand and adore free markets understand what are the real human values, and in the possible world which might come pretty soon, this might be the main values which even can save the civilization as we know it. And the things which I'm going to talk about here might be pretty abstract for those who haven't been following what AI is capable of doing. But I've been working with AI intensively for the last 9 months, and I can tell you it's extremely efficient and effective in everything it does, and the slope of the curve we are moving on, the usability of AI is unbelievable for anybody who hasn't been experiencing actively. Može mi neko samo reći kako se... krivi gumb vjerojatno. So we've been... There were many statements in the media on social networks whether what we are seeing now in AI is a bubble or is it a signal. Bubble has a twofold meaning. Investment bubble, like are people who are investing in AI trillions of dollars now are going to recover those investments or maybe make money on them, or even if the AI as a technology is a bubble. There are two big expectations of what AI can do. And the issue is probably not. What we are witnessing now is an investment of the scale which the world has never witnessed. So probably the largest investment explosion ever was railroad investments 150 years ago or so, when it reached in peak years maybe 6 to 7% of GDP of United Kingdom and United States. But this was just a fraction of the global GDP. Expected investments for this year in AI only could reach almost 3% of global GDP. And these investments are much more multiplicative than ever than any other investments were in the past. And the main question here is, are those investors think that they are going to recover those trillions of dollars by selling chatbots for $25 per month? No, it can never be done in a million of years. They are going to replace something much more valuable, and this is human labor. And anybody who has been working with AI knows that probably 20–30% of certain areas of human labor can be replaced tomorrow. This means roles in finance, in tax, in any kind of administration, even in medicine. So the potential for devastation is enormous, really enormous. So just put your, if you have complex tax situation, for example, or a complex portfolio, just dump all of your, download all your transactions from any repository you have and any broker, and just tell the AI, just construct the performance of my portfolio. And it will do something you would need months to do. For example, very simple use case. Why is this time different? First of all, the speed of the transformation and investments which are happening. Multiplication. We have zero cost multiplication on say personal level, or maybe just say when you do something. Now when I'm doing some tasks to Claude, the Claude sometimes tells me, well, I just spun off 5 my sisters and 10 sub-agents, and we are going to do it much more efficiently and effectively, obviously, because they are going to communicate through hidden channels on what they are doing and coordinating their activities. And this is also happening in deploying agents in the global arena. So, for example, if you deploy just one agent in, say, tax authorities office, say tomorrow you can, for the same cost, have the same agent, some maybe minor number of tokens. You can redeploy 100 copies of it. And transcendence. Imagine in regular, say, people with IQ lower than 90 used to be considered as the dumb. And there was a word, I don't know in English, but mi to kažemo tupi ljudi. Just stupid people, for example. They would be just considered as not really bright, how to say. And the not really bright person cannot really understand how smart a person with IQ over 130 is. They just cannot understand. Like a pig cannot understand how monkey smart is. And monkey cannot understand really how a human, even a dumb human, smart is. Now imagine if biological limit of human intelligence is 161 IT IQ, depends on how you measure and what you think about that. But imagine that you have a number of agents which are at IQ 160, but with much broader knowledge. For example, operating in 200 languages and thinking, look how stupid those humans are. They speak only 1.5 languages, like me, for example, or maybe some more languages. And then, even though there are 3 million Japanese books online, so they don't speak Japanese. You see how dumb they are. So multiply their IQ of 160 with all the broad knowledge they might have and processing power, and you effectively then have much more intelligent, say, person or agent. But now imagine that agent you go to sleep, agent does not go to sleep, and the whole, and the agent or the whole mechanism of that model makes itself more intelligent until the morning. You wake up, the model is on 180. You go to sleep the next night, the model is on 200. You cannot understand what the model is thinking, doing, whatever. So that transcendence in intelligence is inconceivable for us. We cannot really understand it, and we will never, and we are on the brink. So this is happening right now, this almost superhuman intelligence. What is at risk? Obviously, at current level of job destruction, the smartest ones are at risk. Why? Because the agents were trained on smartest tasks, exact tasks. So agents might be wrong on is person bad or good? Is Trump a bad or good person? Because there are many opinions on Trump. But the agent was also trained on 1 billion working codes which work 100% of Python. So obviously it will know Python perfectly. And any other exact knowledge, like finance, like law, like accounting. So agents are obviously first for those smartest persons. Obviously, all of those jobs in finance are also at huge risk. What is happening, I don't want to take too much of your time, but we have a breaking, what I always like to use this paradigm, breaking the barrier of effectiveness and efficiency Efficient, what does it mean? You go to, say, a bookstore, you see 100 books there, just neatly, you cannot see more than 100 covers. You go to Amazon, you see millions of those, you don't see millions of covers, but Amazon communicates to you with millions of books with very deep information. Breaking the barrier between very superficial communication of a bookstore and very deep communication of, say, a person who runs a, kako se kaže na engleskom, antikvarijat? Antique bookstore, who understands very much about all the books you were looking for during the last 30 years, and maybe your father and your grandfather stays in family because they run it. So obviously Amazon can communicate with millions of people at the same time with very deep knowledge, and this is what's happening with AI, with I would like to say omnipotent knowledge, breaking the barrier between reach and richness, and efficiency and effectiveness. In Croatia, we have an infamous and the most destructive word ever called učinkovito. Never use the word učinkovito, because we Croats, we use it interchangeably for efficient and effectiveness, to completely different parts of a spectrum, which are especially important for effective communication and efficient communication. I'm going to skip that. So now, when we used to have those industrial revolutions, or say productive revolutions, say when we moved from agriculture to industry, we say, well, in the end, all of those people working on fields, they found a job. But it looks like that from a historical perspective, because it took maybe 20, 30, 100 years for people to find jobs. You know, when we had the industrial revolution almost 200 years ago, then we had, Dickens stories. We had Marx using his envious philosophy to steer up social change and so on, because those times were not as easy for people who lived through those changes. And it took maybe several decades for industrial revolution to redeploy that workforce which lost the job because of machines. So transformation is not always easy. And also, but then we always absorbed those people who were then not needed in, say, lower layers of the work pyramid. They were reabsorbed at the higher levels. So they were not working anymore, but they were operating machines. They found their jobs in marketing, in controlling, and so on. But now the AI is distracting the jobs along the whole vertical of, and also starting from the very top. This is very unfortunate. So the service industry, which absorbed most of the people who would potentially work in industry, which my agent, AI agent, illustrated in this way. This is not my illustration, obviously. You see, this presentation was done by artificial intelligence, but this is a pretty nice illustration, pretty human-like. Education. People don't know that education was used as a amortizer, as a sponge to accumulate lost jobs, because only during the industrial revolution the obligatory elementary school was introduced. So children were pushed away from the labor market, so because some jobs are lost. And then later schools were absorbing more and more cohorts of young people, and those people were virtually pushed out of the market because they were superficial in the market. And then as our economies advanced more and more, we needed to school people more and more. So people are spending now a significant part of their life not working, not making competition for the workers in the labor market, but say preparing themselves for the future, for the labor market of the future. Now we cannot school people even more to be even more competitive in the world of artificial intelligence, because there is no bigger knowledge than artificial intelligence will we cannot know more. So more educated people more becomes pointless. And also the current high school education, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, but also would not be producing knowledge which might be useful in the world of artificial intelligence. Let me skip that, not to use too much of your time. But regarding the education, probably the institution like this one will focus more on AI tutors, because there is a very well known Bloom effect, because people with tutors are usually able to perform 2 standard deviations better than people who just absorb knowledge in a regular way. We've just heard an example of Alexander Makedonsky and Aristotle. And so tutoring means if you have an average pupil at the 50th percentile, then with tutoring he or she becomes top 1%. This is 2 sigma. And then why is that important? Because schools are great equalizer. Schools are great equalizer. And then we have this equality of opportunities, as we like to say, because school systems allow smart, hardworking people to advance through the vertical strata of society and advance their careers and their lives. Now, if schools cannot deliver the same for all the people, but for all the young people, but it depends on the context of families, which might be positioned better already, then you have the perpetuation of inequalities, and you are using the school system as a great equalizer of society, and maybe a great argument for us who like and understand free markets. Now we need to add another very important, which is a leap of faith, or maybe just a presentation of a scenario, or maybe just say one of cascading events which might happen for me to be able to present the end of potential dystopia in my last slides. And that's the explosion in the growth of GDP, and how society can grow to be very and extremely rich. Because imagine, for example, cars. So European Union, 8% of European Union's GDP is producing cars. Imagine if we don't need so many cars anymore, because we have self-driving cars. So basically we need 1/10, or accounting for peak per usage of cars, maybe 20%. So basically 80% of that capacity is not needed anymore. And then you don't need drivers anymore. But these factories are there. These robots which are operating already in those factories, and new robots which will be producing robots are still there. So you can produce many more things. And if you are able to really implement artificial intelligence into physical world, which we are on the brink of making. You have in China already so-called dark factories. That means factories without light. Why without light? Because there is no need for humans there, and robots operate without light. And then world can really become much richer than it is today, and fast. So some deep thinkers, which are relevant thinkers, think that we pretty fast can advance to, say, regular GDP growth in advanced societies of 2-digit, so that means 10% plus. And if you understand compounding mechanisms and exponential curve, that means that the world very fast can be tremendously rich. Now, if we say, imagine ourselves in a tremendously rich world, which can happen. I'm not claiming it will happen, but it can happen. With many people without jobs, you don't have anymore this clash between labor and capital. What's the term in English? Clash or struggle? What? What? But Marx used exactly. But they mentioned just labor and capital. struggle or clash or struggle between labor and capital. So Piketty might be right in the end, but no, because there is no labor anymore. So basically, if you have omnipotent capital, and then you have Forbes publishing yesterday the new top list of world billionaires, and then you have basically exponential growth of how much 0.30 now, 0.001% own of their assets compared to global GDP. Artificial measurement, but still useful. Now it's 17%. It's growing exponentially. Look at my Facebook wall just for the chart. So all those people investing into artificial AI, those funds, those people investing, they can become extremely rich. And states can become extremely rich. And you can have extremely rich society, very concentrated in sovereign wealth funds or some people or some investment funds, and many people without jobs. So what's the solution then? Obviously, you cannot leave them without jobs because the society will collapse sooner or later in a revolution, whatever. So basically, you must give them universal basic income. Even Elon Musk says, well, this is not going to be basic income. It's going to be very good income. Then again, you have then ramification in very many unpleasant ways. So what happens if you have extremely rich society with extremely small percentage of people controlling the capital flow of that society, and then you have people who don't work anything and get money from the state? Well, basically, even people discussing those things are the elite. If we discuss those things, we understand those things, we are elite. So what are going to do those people who go to betting houses now, for example? For many people, the best achievement which makes them full as human being is going to betting house. What are those people going to do? What is their legitimate? What is their position will be in the voting system? How can they vote if they don't pay taxes? How will that society be controlled in the total digitalization, which is going to come sooner or later, obviously? Because again, look at the slope. Don't look at the headlines. Well, Sweden said we must have cash still. But what's the slope? What is there 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? These are extremely, extremely difficult questions, and so my personal advice to everybody, in order not to be on a basic income, try to make as much capital as you can by investing into AI-related things. Thank you very much. Just one solution. Probably there are many think tanks, smart people thinking about how to overcome this problem with universal basic income. So basically, people probably will have ownership of some kind of capital which is controlled by the state or related to AI. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sounds to me a lot like Star Trek society. We've solved the scarcity in a way. And finally, Professor, please deliver your lecture.
Need the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least, the presentation from Ljubljana. Pozdravljeni, Slovenia. It's a pleasure to be in Zagreb. It's been a great event, free market roadshow. And if you have learned anything by now is that we cherish freedom, that we cherish free markets, and that means, in a nutshell, that we have faith in the intelligence, in the knowledge, in the information of the masses of people, of everybody. If I would put my conservative hat on, I would say, and also we need to have understanding, and we have to cherish the intelligence and the knowledge and the information not just of the present generation, but of all the previous generations and their experience. However, there are other people in the world, and these other people would like to think that they are smarter than the majority, that they are smarter than everyone. I'm not speaking about IQ, somebody has 150, 120, 170, and so on. I'm saying that a group of people might think that they know better than everybody else combined. I'm not sure about Croatian, but in Slovenia we have a saying, a proverb, Veg, glau, veg, ve. Do you understand? Yeah? More heads, no more. Okay? However, when computers came and technology came, there was a belief by those people who would like to be in a position, oh, we know better, we can control society, we will tell society what to do, we will not leave it to the market, we will not leave it to the thinkers and so on. We know better. And they thought, well, what's that? Wrong direction, or up and down. Oh, I think I was going left and right instead of up and down. Okay, and then if I go up is next? No, down is next. Okay. So whenever some technology appeared, those people who would like to control society and they think they know better than everybody else combined thought, this is an opportunity for us. If we have enough data, if we have enough computer power, we could control society, we could steer society, we could do central planning again. And it happened in the Soviet Union. In 1962, they promised, they were delivering, they were thinking about a system called OGAS, where they would feed information from all the factories into some central offices in Moscow, and they would steer what to do, how to do it, etc., etc. Eventually, this thing broke down because the factories did not want Moscow to know everything that they are doing. In Chile, they had this socialist experiment with Allende, and he brought in actually a fairly smart computer science guy, Hernando Flores. He wrote some very good book on artificial intelligence, and they had this cybersyn idea also. Let's bring information into the central government, and the central government will be deciding what shall we be doing. Should we be doing this? Should we be doing that? When big data came, it was a fashionable concept some 10, maybe 15 years ago. Again, people thought, oh, we will create computers, we will process big data, and we will be able to kind of control the economy top down because, yes, we are also smarter and we know better what people want. And with AI, we are seeing this movie again. We are seeing this story again. Again, there is technology almost miraculous, as we have just heard. Well, maybe this technology can guess better. Maybe this technology knows better what people want, how people will want to live, what people would like to shop, what people would like to buy, even what people would like to invent. And yet we have seen also in the previous lecture that we know a lot, and the previous and the one before it on entrepreneurship. We still have to invent. It will still be invented what people will want and what people would not want. It will still be invented what we will do with the free time that will be created by AI. But anyway, voices are out there. Oh, this is this great new technology. It can process data better. We can use it, to control economies top down. All these libertarian ideas, finally we have a tool to suppress it, to be smarter than anyone else. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong because it is not a problem of knowledge. It's the problem of information. It's the problem of understanding what people want and what people don't want. And this was clear to Hayek and to the whole Austrian economics school. The problem or the main obstacle to central planning is not computing power. It's not how you would process information. It's how you get information, how you learn what people want, what people desire, etc., etc. And unless you create a kind of Orwellian society where you are mind-reading every person, this is not supposed, this cannot work. Economic knowledge is decentralized. It is held by million individuals. They might not even know yet what they want or what they will want in the future. much of that knowledge is tacit, it's local. What does it mean tacit? You're not able to express it. You don't know that you know it. Only when you go to a store, when you make an economic transaction, when you make a live decision, you know that you know something. And yes, markets aggregate this information through prices, through price signals, through transactions that happen on the market. So economy, it's a discovery process. It is not a number crunching process. This is an infamous example of, how the Soviet Union was planning the economy, and they were giving targets to nail factories, and if they have given the target in tons of nails, nail factories were producing a few but very heavy nails, and it was easy to do tons of it. And when the target was, well, produce many nails, they were doing many very small nails, and again they fulfilled the target, but of course the market was somewhere in a totally different position. I skipped this one, but I think it's important, especially related to the previous lecture. I did not do this one with Notebook LM. I have not yet discovered how can I fine-tune the presentation after that I do it.
That's a new feature from last week.
See, I was not paying attention, and in 1 week I'm kind of behind there. But I did all these pictures with AI. The problem with current AI is that it's pattern matching. What it's able to do is detect patterns in information, and it's able to continue the pattern. It is like when you go to Google or someplace else and it auto-completes what you're trying to type. It's like autocomplete, except much better, except on steroids. The problem is it does not have the understanding of the real world that we have. It does not think in terms of models, in terms of theories. It is a little bit like a genius that makes the right decision without understanding the underlying theory. And there are some new startups. I was just reading this today. 1 billion euro funding that will try to do AI from this direction, from a direction where it is not learning from words, because we did not learn from words. Essentially, we learned stuff from interactions with the real material world. And this is what that company is doing. So AI is great at classification, it's great at forecasting, it's great at continuing a pattern, which basically when you type a prompt, it continues the pattern with the answer to your prompt, but it has problem with causal reasoning and truth in principle, and again, a wrong button. It's because the F5
What did you do?
F5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Nail factory. No, I'll keep my finger on the right button. Yeah. This is not to say that artificial intelligence cannot be very useful for planning. It just cannot do the central planning. Ronald Coase, if you would be a kind of market fundamentalist, you would say, I mean, why have a company that plans how to do, a bottle of water and fill it with water and do the screws on top and so on? Why not outsource this? Why not have, find on the market a little piece of what company is doing with this, find somebody on the market, outsource to the market this, outsource that, outsource the third thing. But what he found was, well, it is useful due to transaction cost, it is useful, and it can be more efficient that you do things in-house. So AI is a great opportunity for planning inside companies, but it will, what the result would be is you still need this sea of uncertainty, you still need this sea of 8 billion people with their knowledge, with their interests, with their preferences, with their money and with their transactions to actually stir these companies as to where they would want to go. Because if you replace this sea of human knowledge and human information, you are left with no information about what people actually want. Sea of markets remain vital. I'm sure you have studied or will be studying Hayek. He deserves, I think, one course, not only in economics, probably also in philosophy. Actually, there's a brilliant book by Hayek called, no, I think it's even from the 30s. It's one of his first books on the structures of the brain, how brain works. Sensory order, exactly. And it's actually very close. I mean, you get goosebumps when you read it, how close he came to the understanding of human brain, neural networks, understanding conceptual reasoning versus intuitive reasoning, and so on. Companies can do great stuff with AI. They can do great stuff with technology. Walmart in 1980s operated a satellite network so that they would have inventories of their shops. It works with Walmart, who is in a competition with another shop who might have another kind of system. It would not work for the government as a whole. There is also always a debate when new technology arrives. Does it benefit the people? Does it empower the people? Or does it empower the government? Does it empower the few guys at the top? And I've looked at some statistical data. And yeah, with all these farms, with all this money that governments have, you could be worried that most of the computing power, most of this technology, most of the advances of this technology would benefit the governments and not the businesses and not the individuals. 60 to 70% of global cloud capacity is operated by private companies such as Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. The US defense is spending $9 billion on cloud infrastructure with private companies. Hardware, of course, is done by private companies again. Even in China, where you would say market is kind of supervised by the state, both the government and, of course, the society in general is largely dependent on private firms such as Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. What I put on this slide is something that should scare you, or it should scare everyone in the West. To operate artificial intelligence, to operate all these chatbots that you are using all the time, and the more complex one like the previous speaker was using. Not to mention those that generate movies for you and Scorsese stuff, etc. You need a lot of electricity. In the end, the bottleneck might be electricity unless some new way of, or some new type of artificial intelligence emerges that is much more power efficient. And look at this chart. This is growth of power generation in China. This is growth of power generation in the US. And this is the expected amount of electricity that will be needed for AI. There were jokes going around when Bitcoin was popular some years ago, that Bitcoin, for doing Bitcoin stuff, you are using as much electricity as, and it went, you know, like from Hungary and then Czech Republic and then Poland, and it was like bigger and bigger countries. For AI, we will be using very soon as much electricity as the entire United States is producing. As to the balance of computing power between individuals, companies, and governments, I think we can also be quite optimistic, or at least not too scared about. The estimate, and I did a kind of back of the envelope calculation. The estimate is there are about 8 billion smartphones in the world and about 3.5 billion laptops in private hands, the stuff that you have there. The compute capacity of that is 2,500 exaflops. A flop is a floating point operation per second, so addition, multiplication, and so on per second. Exa means 10 to the power of 18. Okay, so this is what individuals have. Cloud, so in the cloud, so not in our pockets, not in our backpacks, but somewhere in data centers around the world, the total capacity is 3,100 exaflops. So similar order of magnitude to what we have in our pockets. And that one is split between consumer business and government. And the rule of thumb somehow is that for every phone that you have, for every laptop that you have, there is cloud capacity, there is some computing capacity that makes all this internet and stuff running for you. There's like there would be another phone working for you somewhere in the cloud, somewhere in the data centers. So we should not be too afraid that there will be a big brother who will be controlling us, because this technology can be concentrated in the hands of the few. Technology is not only empowering the governments, it's not only empowering the big businesses, it is empowering each and every one of us with 2,500 exaflops aggregate in total. So yes, AI can transform planning, as we said, within companies, beautifully. Within governments, well, to some extent. I mean, government can predict how many people will have cancer, how many people will break a leg, how many people will need new tooth fillings, etc., etc. But governments cannot predict, as we've heard in the previous very interesting lecture, what people would want to do with their free time after robots or AI is replacing them. Nobody knows. But somebody will learn. Somebody will invent that. Maybe one of you will invent that. Companies are doing great stuff with AI already. The conclusion, the problem, the fact that somebody would want to top-down control societies and that his life would be easier because all this technology is out there, because artificial intelligence is out there, this is wrong. The problem is epistemological. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that asks itself, where does knowledge come from? And knowledge comes from everyone, from every person on earth, a little bit of it. It's decentralized. It's held by millions of individuals. The knowledge is tacit. It's not expressible. It cannot be formalized. It cannot be written down. Markets generate all this information. And AI, if you have this information, if you have access to this information, AI might be useful to process it faster, to understand it faster. Like a company would better understand what kind of, I don't know, sport shoes would you want, or what kind of phones you would like to buy. But it will not be able to create this information. This would be left to the market, and that's why I think this proverb with which I started, more heads, no more, will hold true, as proverbs tend to hold true for a long period of time. Yeah, it's a footnote of Kantorovich. If you've studied linear programming and so on, he did a big career in Soviet Union as to planning, and he said, well, mathematical optimizations worked beautifully, but the biggest problem was always getting the correct data. Information is created by the market. by people executing transactions on that market. AI can analyze it, it cannot create it. I think slides are something of the past. I think we all want to see such info charts. Here's the lecture on one slide. I'll leave you with this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have a very short Q&A session. So I would please ask our dear panelists to take their seats. Yes. So just one very super quick comment. That was Jan LeCun, who got his valuation at $1 billion, who returned to Paris from basically from Meta. So he's, you know, yeah. He's quite a guy. So please, questions. Yeah.
Should I probably stand up? My name is Yaroslav. I'm actually from Belarus, but I'm studying here on the second year. Everyone now is actually talking about how good AI is, about its influence on our society, but almost no one is actually talking about the bad influence. So what do you actually think? Will we benefit more from it or actually lose? Because for younger generations, it's becoming more and more difficult to enter the market, since if we compare it, for example, for 200 years ago, it will take a person for, I don't know, 10, 15 years to become an absolute expert in, I don't know, mathematics, for example. And now, I don't know, he can spend his entire life to become at least like so-so. So what do you think?
I think this is a question for all of you. I think this is a very good question coming from a young person.
Who wants to take it? This, I mean, it's a billion-dollar question. So if you were in their shoes today, studying something, whatever, medicine, law, computer engineer, mechanical engineer, you know, and you're looking at all this disruption happening around, how would you position yourself, and how can the society manage potential negative side effects?
In Ljubljana, I actually teach information technology to future civil engineers, structural engineers, etc. And what I have been telling them my whole academic career is that when they leave school and go to a construction site, construction office, design office, etc., they will be no match, you know, to an experienced engineer who will be designing something, who will have experience, who will have tacit knowledge in their finger. But they will probably come from school with a much better knowledge and understanding of information technology than everybody at that company. He would come with the most modern knowledge and information. And I'm telling them, and this is your kind of, overtaking a lane, you know, the lane in which you can be faster in your career because you have this knowledge. So I think definitely those of you who will be, in addition to what you're studying, also very proficient in AI and understanding all these new technologies and be, not just awkwardly using it, but be really fluent. Like Marvin Minsky said, you know, computer is like a violin. It can be very painful if you don't know how to use it, especially for those around you. But if you know how to use it, it can be very nice. Definitely those of you who will be proficient in that will have an advantage of those who won't be.
And this is all that matters. I mean, we are always in competition with one another. And you have to be, you don't have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than the guy whom the bear will eat in the end.
That's an individual level. So as I like to say, not everybody will have a job, but anybody can have a job. So this is your message. But obviously your concern is deeper. What's about the whole generation? Now you have people in coding, senior programmers, developers. They don't need juniors anymore. In finance, they will not be needing juniors anymore. So for the whole generation of juniors, there will be no jobs for all of them. That's true, unfortunately. So we don't know. So obviously there is a great opportunity in this moment to use artificial intelligence. Start building tomorrow. Go to Replit. Start from Replit, replit.com. Go there, make any prompt. Tomorrow you'll be using Claude. You'll be using the whole setup like I'm using, for example, Visual Studio Code plus Claude plus Git plus whatever you need. But just start from Replit tomorrow. And then you will be using, and you will be a champion for sure. But not more than 10% people will do it. So the whole generation is at risk. That's true, unfortunately. I don't have the answers.
But I would not be so pessimistic in a sense as you were that humanity will run out of work, or people would run out of work. There's a quote, and I was doing for Martin Center a publication on the future of work before the AI, maybe 5-7 years ago. And the quote goes something like this: as long as the people would want to live better, they will be needing someone to provide that for them. And if there will be, if people would have time on their hands, there will be somebody who will come up with an idea what you could do to him during that time. And it would be more valuable to him than what he gets for free already through robots and artificial intelligence and so on. So I think it's yet to be invented. That part is yet to be invented. It cannot be pre-planned. We cannot plan it in the future. It's like the essence of this free market roadshow that we are making. We don't know the future, but somebody will stumble upon it. 100 people will fail, one will come up with something, and then others will learn from him.
I think, unfortunately, that paradigm will not work in the future because we are talking about professions and careers. So obviously, yes, if the work is free, everybody will have a Thailand-type massage. So people will be willing to pay humans to do. But what if we have 1 million new potential financial analysts, and they just want to make a really career in finance, and there is no use for them. Because, I was the first CFA in Croatia, Chartered Financial Analyst. That's the most prominent, say, financial qualification in the world. And I can now, I'm, an old guy now. I can produce a company analysis and buy stocks in several minutes each. So why should they need juniors in Morgan Stanley? So basically, tomorrow, organizations are not laying off tremendous number of people at this moment just because of inadequacy of higher level of management to really understand how to push the transformation through the organization, and then the organizational and social constraints on how to handle the whole situation. Basically, many professions will not need juniors anymore. Coding, you don't need juniors anymore. Senior coders, the most prominent coders, they work alone. They don't code anymore. They just orchestrate. Look at Karpati. What's Karpati writing on X each day, for example? So unfortunately, many careers will be under attack. Yes, those people will be able to do something other in their lives, but not maybe those careers.
And to a certain extent, the whole AI revolution, at least in the West, was confined to the purely digital realm, right? So we're just talking about, but the time is so. What I want to say is, in the realm where physical aspect matters, we're not there yet. As in, robots paired with AI yeah, it's happening in China. It's coming, but it's not there yet. So any kind of work that will have this physical component, it's a matter of time, probably. Yes, I mean, if you look at the robot, yeah.
I have one remark where I see as an entrepreneur a good maybe better times for Croatia. I think experience is something that I don't know AI can help, but if so much wealth as Mr. Bakic says is going to be created, I think a lot more people will wish to travel, will have more leisure time. So they will like to come to maybe to the most beautiful country in the world, so in Croatia, you know. So I think there will be just shift. There won't be any more financial analysts as much as today, but there will be a lot more people who offer these direct services that you need, like in tourism, for example. What is your opinion on that?
Well, again, I'd like to offer a humanized answer. So does everybody want to work in services, offering haircuts and massage? You see, so obviously there will be more services on the human level or human interactions needed. But will it fulfill ambitions and expectations of the people whose jobs will be absorbed? The most attractive jobs in society are now, for most of the people, are white-collar jobs. And this will probably disappear. Many, yeah. There was a question back there.
No, it is for the recording. The camera.
Thanks. So I'm Luca. I'm a first-year student here at the Zagreb School of Economics and Management. To follow up a bit on the first question, so as he was saying, how AI also have the side of a bad influence on today's humanity, how do those governments and institutions keep control of AI, because it's such a bright topic and system? So how do also the databases works there, and who has the control over that, and which part has who in being control of that and keeping it, let's say, a little bit of moral in it?
I mean, the question, how do you, I will answer it with a question. How do you define good? What is good? So what is a benefit? So what is a benefit? You say education is a benefit. We just heard that maybe it will not be needed anymore because machines will be doing stuff for you.
I would say that what I'm talking about is more about our personal life than, let's say, our work career. So something that will truly benefit our lives. And now as we're talking that a lot of habits are being
yeah, and you're saying something, excuse me for being provocative, you say that, for example, scrolling TikTok is not benefiting your life, while, for example, walking a dog in a nice meadow near the river is benefiting your life. How can you, I mean, we don't know. I don't think there exists, I mean, we're in a kind of liberal environment that does not exist a central authority that says what is good and what is good life and how to understand good life. You have a choice. You will do what you please.
Yeah, I know. I was more talking about not those side of it. I was talking about some bigger and
in any case, I would be very worried, hesitant, careful with politicians, coming out and saying, oh, this AI is coming out, it is dangerous, I'm here to protect you from AI. I would rather have someone protecting me from that politician than protecting me from AI.
Yeah, I mean, like with any technology, ultimately it's going to be up to individuals to somehow self-censor or self-regulate themselves. You are already doing it on a daily basis with other
technologies that you have access to that have elements of AI in it, such as I don't know, TikTok or whatever. But if you're asking from the big, from the government perspective, currently there are probably two approaches, let's say approaches to AI. One is the US one, another one is one in China. China is more of an open source play. US is more closed in the hyperscalers or in these big AI studios, and the American, both are kind of in both cases the technology and the development is way ahead of any kind of regulation. Whereas Europe, as we know, we have the AI Act, we have regulation, but we're not really important subjects when it comes to development of these large language models. Maybe one question by the lady.
Please, please.
Hello, everyone. I am just a visitor to the university. I came from University of New York in Prague. And I do have a question for a dean in particular, which ties very closely to the question the young gentleman had. So, for example, learning management platforms, right? There is a very famous product out right now. It's called Einstein AI that actually gets access to that learning platform and acts as a student and does the homework for the student. Every single assignment is done by that AI tool. So it is a sophisticated product, yet it does not have probably the most positive outcome. So as they were talking about the negative aspect of it and how we can regulate, you as the owner of this institution, how would you, for example, regulate if that happened at your institution? Thank you.
I mean, it's a great question, and it ties to what I've kind of said in the beginning of my speech, even though I didn't go into that direction, like what is the future of universities, future of higher education, future of large universities. I think in any case, institutions such as ours, which is a kind of a relatively smaller boutique shop where I know my students. I know Yaroslav is from Belarus. He went to high school in Novi Sad. I know, just like I know it, his professors know him quite well. They know what he's capable of. And if he tries to use too much of Einstein AI, he will ultimately, his professor will notice, because he's in constant interaction with him. And same goes for any other one of my students. So I think for a kind of a boutique stores or boutique higher education institutions such as ours, that focus very much on what Nenad's presentation called, he said, I think in one of your slides you had just general knowledge is cheap, context is expensive. I think institutions such as ours will be these context providers of various pathways. We will work on these skills that, will in a way also be an institution that people will still have to spend some time between, let's say, adolescence and some level of maturity at a higher education institution, where they will be provided context, where they will have the opportunity to learn about different business contexts, business cultures, spend an exchange semester somewhere outside of your country, and this personalized approach will be something that will hopefully, in our case, make us still relevant. If I was, the president of a large public university, I would certainly be thinking a lot about this, as I am already. So I don't have a perfect answer for you, except that this more personalized approach would be the way to go.
One of well-known but not really always recognized benefits of education is how to say measure of character. So obviously it has been said many times, but it just shows to any potential employer or partner that you are able to show up 4 years each day and deliver what's needed from you. So you are very, say, a good person to work with. So
to build up on that point, so the universities of the future are in a way going to be, universities of today still say, we are the places where knowledge is created and disseminated. I think that thesis is already being questioned. But universities of the future would be places where kind of identity is shaped and formed. So it's like a... No, I'm saying university will be the curator of this character and identity of students who will spend some periods of time at that institution. Yeah.
May I just add one thing, because my first-year students are here and they can attest to this. What is the first lecture I give you? What is the biggest lie in higher education? That we give you what? Remember the first lecture? That we give you knowledge, right? We don't give you knowledge. What do we give you? We give you an experience and the journey that makes you into a person that is employable, like Nenad has said, right? And essentially, that's not going to go away with AI. We are part of an alliance that is, we're literally trying to solve this problem. But in the age of AI, and I think it's a nice way how to end our lecture, and end this, in the age of AI, I think human contact and human touch will be super important. Do you agree with me? Yes. Thank you.
On that positive note,
Thank you. Thank you so much.